Scene 11. Looking down at her 13-year-old niece who was only 3 inches shorter than her 5'8" height, Rosemary raised an eyebrow to the outlandish statement that the girl in front of her was a teenage boy. She had already heard how the girl declared herself to be the prettiest 10-year-old princess, and she wasn't sure why Mackenzie thought she could get away with the claim. "Is that so?" she said with a smile, wondering if they were playing a game before she came in or her little red-headed niece was trying to get Kennedy to play a role in some make-believe story before Kennedy had refused telling her how she was a princess. "I'm telling the truth." "Kennedy, tell her. You can trust her, I promise." Kennedy's eyes flicked from Mackenzie to the older woman who said he could call her Rosie. His heart felt like it was beating fast enough to burst out of his chest, like in that alien movie he had watched in the middle of the night once when everyone else was asleep after he had been told it was for adults. He had been 12 and it hadn't been too scary. He had just made a deal with the girl so that she wouldn't tell anyone about who he really was, and then the first person that came near her she went and blabbed. "No." He dragged out the word. "I'm 10 and not a boy." He did his best to sound irritated at her. "I'm telling the truth." Mackenzie pleaded with her aunt, giving her foster brother a glare when she turned her head to look in his direction. "You can trust her, I promise. We won't get in any trouble, she can help." Kennedy again looked between the two. Something in his facial expression must have given something away about what he was thinking, or so he thought when he saw Mackenzie nodding towards him vigorously. Swallowing hard, he fiddled with his hands, having a hard time meeting the beautiful freckled woman's eyes. Swearing to himself that if Mackenzie was playing him so he would be taken away, he wasn't just going to lock her in the basement, he was going to push her down the stairs and lock the door before he was carted off. I'm not what I said. I'm really a 17-year-old boy." Rosemary leaned her head back ever so slightly, not responding for a few seconds. Each second that ticked by made Kennedy more and more nervous. "Is that so? What makes you think that?" Rosemary asked. Kennedy's eyes flicked back to Mackenzie for a second, feeling unsure of himself more with the playful tone in the pretty girls. "Ah." He swallowed hard, adding a little firmness to his voice. "Because I am. That is what all my paperwork with." He waved his hand in the air, forgetting what the government agency was called that he had been in since his parents passed. "The Child Protective Adoption people." Rosemary nodded her head slowly, glancing over at her niece for a second before letting out a long but restrained sigh. Everyone knew any system controlled by the government was broken. Most commonly, the Justice Department was thought of with their two systems. One for the rich and one for everyone else, but hardly anyone thought of how broken a system could be when it came to taking care of children. Out in California, she had heard that any child in their care that had money coming to them, that they would bill or just take the money right out of the child's accounts to pay for education, food, and housing. She knew from her own experiences that the education they got was well behind what children got in normal public schools, and she knew just how messed up their records could get when she was told her time was up when she was 17. Not a dollar in her pocket, too young to get most jobs, and no place to live, she was pushed out of the foster care system to fend for herself on the streets. She hoped Kennedy was fibbing or had just overheard something incorrectly, but she could believe some overworked agent mixed up the girl's file with some boys, making it so that as far as the government was concerned she was 7 years older and a different gender. She really, really hoped the girl was wrong, otherwise if it wasn't for her older sister this girl would be living on the streets in a year, trying to survive. Nothing an 11-year-old should ever have to consider, let alone live through. Rosemary could see the worry on the girl's face. She was just about to open her mouth to reassure her when the door to the daycare's bathroom opened up and her youngest niece came walking out, her hands still dripping with water from when she washed her hands. Seeing her Aunt Abigail's lips move to a large smile as she opened her mouth. Dashing forward like a rocket, her white sandals clapped on the floor as she charged forward, arms spread wide. "Aunt Rosie!" She yelled loud enough that Jolene stopped what she was doing to watch the youngest Adams leap forward, wrapping her arms around her aunt as the woman caught the girl in her arms, spinning her around in a tight hug before putting her down. "I'm happy to see you too, Abby Bug." She laughed as she spun the girl around, putting her back down on the floor with a bright smile, ignoring the fact the girl had wiped her wet hands on the back of her tank top. "We were just talking." Rosemary looked at the two other girls there with her. "It was about your new sibling here. I heard her say how she was." Rosemary met Kennedy's eyes, poking her in the stomach and trying to give her a reassuring smile. "What was it?" "That she was the prettiest 10-year-old princess." Kennedy found himself blushing enough that he put both his hands over his cheeks to hide it. He had just confessed who he really was, what he was, and she was teasing him about what Mackenzie had made him say to keep that very secret. It was like shame personified had found its way inside of him and was trying to get back out through his face. Abigail pushed her jaw forward, shaking her head 3 times before making a fist, pressing her thumb against her chest. "I'm the princess." Rosemary adored the girl. She was so pure, not innocent. She knew that for a fact, but she was always true to herself. She reached out, touching the girl's cheek. "You are a princess, but so is Kenzie and so is Kennedy, little bug. Just like your mommy is a queen, but that isn't what we were talking about." It seems both Kenzie and her think she is a teenage boy because the adoption people say so. "What do you think? Does she really look like a teenage boy?" Abigail's attention let her hand fall down, looking towards Kennedy as she whispered to herself just loud enough that those standing by could still hear her. "I'm the princess." She didn't remember how old Kennedy had said they were, but whatever it was, she hadn't really believed him. Not in her heart. He was barely taller than her, and everyone got taller when they grew up. Today he had wanted to play dress up. He had said Mom had made him. Sometimes she told her what to wear, but she was a big girl now and could pick out her own clothes. Today she got to help Kennedy pick out some pretty panties, some of her socks, and after he had gotten sick he had even put on her dress and she had almost forgotten how they had traded shoes, but his were broken. Kennedy didn't look like a boy at all, really. So she scrunched her face up, shaking her head. "I vote that Kennedy is a girl, but like if I grow taller than her then I get to be the older sister." "I thought you liked being the younger sister, being spoiled like you are," Mackenzie said, forgetting momentarily how her sister was undermining her. "Oh, well then she can't have my spot," Abby said. Mackenzie nodded once, knowing how that would come out, but then mentally kicking herself. "Wait, you don't get to vote if she is a girl." Mackenzie spoke up abruptly after a few seconds, all of them having Kennedy feel like crawling into a hole somewhere he could be forgotten. Across the room Jolene looked blankly at the family, wondering what exactly they were discussing. "Kenzie is right, Abby Bug. You don't get a vote if she is a girl." Mackenzie looked over at Kennedy, chewing on the inside of her cheek for a moment, realizing she had just thought of Kennedy as a girl. The entire situation had gotten out of her control. Meanwhile Kennedy was feeling uneasy, and the word uneasy was doing a lot of heavy lifting. On one hand, this woman could easily turn him in, even if Mackenzie said she is trustworthy, and Abby, she was just a brat. There didn't seem to be another hand, just more worries with her not taking them seriously. It was maddening that someone could see him, even dressed like this, have him confess, and then still think he was not just a girl, but 7 years younger. How about this Kennedy? Rosemary glanced at each of her nieces before focusing her attention on the blue-eyed girl who had started to look more and more nervous as the conversation went on, just making her heart weep for the girl. She could imagine her telling the employee working her case that it was wrong and them saying they would look into it later, just blowing her off. They weren't evil, they were just overworked, underfunded, and the people with the real power to make positive change for them didn't care. "I will talk to your caseworker Kennedy and clear all this up," but for now. No more of this teenage boy stuff. You girls are too young to be thinking about boys. Kendi loves a teen boy, Abby declared, happily remembering what she learned at lunch. She kissed Kenzie's classmate at the park today. I did not. He kissed me. It was yuck, Kennedy said, making a gagging motion. Rosemary put a hand over her mouth, covering up her smile. It was precious to hear the girl get a kiss from a boy when she was clearly upset about it as she shivered. It was one of those stories she could tell to some future boyfriend to cause embarrassment in a way only family could. She remembered trying to do that to Mia when she visited her after her engagement, telling her suitor how when they were younger a boy had kissed her on the cheek under some mistletoe and how she had given him a black eye for it. Well, is that okay with you, Kennedy? She asked, knowing how important independence was to someone coming from her background. Kennedy really didn't want to try to reassert himself a second time and have her still not believe him. His ego felt like it had been through a shredder today. The last thing he needed was someone to cut it up into confetti. If she didn't, the only thing he could think to do was to pull up the stupid yellow dress and pull down the panties to show her how much of a man he was. Flashing a woman he wanted to drool over while wearing an 8-year-old girl's clothes was not how he wanted today or any day to go. It's fine. Good. Then you girls stay here. I'm going to go bother my sister, in a way that only a little sister can. She gave a wink to Abby. Maybe I can see if we can go out for dinner tonight. What do you say? Mackenzie had kept chewing on the inside of her cheek. She had told the truth, but her little game with Kennedy hadn't ended. It was all going to be straightened out, and she did have the video to show her mom, because when she told Aunt Rosie the truth, she really didn't want anyone to think she was a liar. She didn't think she could let go of it in her mind, but the idea of going out to eat sounded so much better than eating something microwaved or leftovers that they tended to eat when their mom worked late. Pizza. Can we have pizza? She asked excitedly, thinking about going to the place that had a pizza buffet. Brownies, Abby said, throwing her hands up in the air like she had said the secret word to win a game show. Brownies aren't dinner, Mackenzie declared, correcting her sister. Yeah, well, they are better than pizza, Abby responded by sticking her tongue out. Rosemary turned to the only one who hadn't responded, noticing how the girl had shrunk back when the two started arguing. Rosemary had no intention to stop them. That was just how kids were, and doubly so for siblings. She still acted like that with her sister at times. She had missed having Mia there to play with, to argue with when she was lucky enough to be adopted. This girl had no one and seemed to pull in on herself the louder the girls got, something she could also understand. Kennedy was young enough that she could still have a healthy family life. Being with her sister and her girls would put her on the right path. Unlike herself, she had seen the bad in people too often. She made a living off of those people. So the only family she was ever going to have, far as she was concerned, was her nieces and her sister. What about you, Kennedy? What do you want for dinner tonight? Kennedy deeply wished she would stop looking at him. It made it so much harder for him to not look back, and when he looked at her he wanted to stare. Her long red hair, her green eyes, the freckles across her face, and her, well, she had the same wonderful assets Miss Mia had, and he really didn't want to think about that unless he was alone. Anything is fine. Anything is fine. Rosemary nodded. The girl has been with my sister for a week and still hasn't come out of her shell. She recalled how Mia had said the child she was adopting had to be fostered first because of behavior issues, and how they hadn't had an easy time with previous foster homes. She had mentioned how small Kennedy was because of the first home they were in. She didn't think the girl was that small for her age, but she wasn't a good person to ask about those sorts of things either. The scar on the girl's chin though spoke volumes to her: violence and abuse. That was something she understood. Well, we don't have to decide right now. Think about it, and maybe you three can come together and decide for us. Brownies do sound good, the little bug. She leaned down, giving her niece a kiss on the forehead. Maybe for dessert though, okay? Abby nodded happily to her aunt, watching her walk off to talk to Miss Jolene. I want soup, the 8-year-old declared, suddenly turning on her sister who just crossed her arms. You do not. The only soup you like is raviolis from the can, and that isn't even a soup. Mackenzie narrowed her eyes at her sister, knowing she loved pizza just as much as she did, but just loved being difficult to try and win. Always trying to win when no one was competing. It tastes good, but maybe we can have pizza. But I want pepperoni, the young girl declared. Kennedy stood there, all three of them still standing in the girls' play area. He didn't have anywhere to go, so he just stood there watching Mackenzie shake her head at her little sister's demands. Why would I care if we get pepperoni? We always get pepperoni. Abigail put her fists to her hips, moving up to the balls of her feet to try and look taller as she looked up to her much taller, older sister, glaring hard into her eyes. But I want pepperoni, the young girl declared louder. Mackenzie opened her mouth to speak and then stopped before taking a deep breath. Turning to Kennedy, who was standing a little ways back from herself and her pesky siblings. This is what you have to look forward to, but this is how you put a stop to it, she said, rolling her eyes before looking back to her sister, who for some unknown reason was puffing up her chest to attempt to look bigger. Abby, you win. The younger sibling's eyes lit up almost like a Christmas tree, throwing one fist in the air, hopping around in place in a circle. Yes. Looking from the now dancing Abby and then over to Mackenzie, he tried to puzzle out what was going on. His eyes flicked between them a few more times. But she didn't win anything, he whispered to the older of the two girls. Mackenzie shrugged before whispering back. She would just keep going, telling her she is the winner when I'm really the winner. By getting her to stop is just part of being the older sibling. Scene 12. Flipping through some pages of a report, Mia heard a knocking sound come from the solid wooden doors of her office. She looked up to the door and then back down to the report, tossing the thing to a corner of her desk, not sure if she write up her employee for incompetence or promote them for the ability to write an entire report that sounded like he was saying something about the current toxicity levels of a river, without actually saying anything at all. Come, she started to say, so that whatever employee was here on a weekend with her knew they could interrupt her, but before she finished it was already opening. Mia pressed her red lips into a thin line as whoever had knocked came into her office, but soon as she saw who it was, the irritation vanished, replaced with surprise and joy as she saw her little red-headed sister coming walking in. Rosie! What are you doing here? Mia said as she stood up, walking around her desk to intercept her sister with a hug. I was in town and figured I could swing by and see my favorite sister and your little ones, Rosemary said with a bright smile as she squeezed her older sister a little tighter. Pulling back from the embrace Mia took in her sister. The two of them had similar shaped faces and builds, and had always been close in height, Rosie seemingly growing faster than her, but both ended up close to the same height, with her little sister ending up an inch taller than herself. Her sibling had bright red hair, while she had blonde hair. Rosie liked keeping hers long, while she preferred it shorter. She had blue-green eyes, Rosie had green ones. Mia gave her outfit a glance, happy to see she wasn't dressed like she was going to or had come from a client. No, she looked relaxed in her purple ribbed tank top, black yoga pants and purple sneakers. In town to work? Mia raised a single eyebrow. Rosemary rolled her eyes, knowing her sister never did nor would approve of what she did to make money. Her big sister thought of sex as something couples did, something out of love, while she just thought of it, well, as something less deep. She knew coal miners destroyed their bodies for a paycheck, as did a lot of professions. She didn't think what she did was that much different, and even with all the risks of being an escort, it was still a lot safer and paid better than many jobs. No, just in town to see my judgmental sister and my lovely nieces. Seemed like a good time to visit with you adopting Kennedy. Cutest little thing, she said, thinking about the young girl in her little yellow dress. Sliding her hand down her little sister's arm, Mia gave her hand a light squeeze before walking back to her desk, motioning for her to take a seat. I take it you stopped downstairs then and... Mia squinted her eyes, looking up at a wall for a brief moment as she pictured Kennedy. The boy had some rough edges to him, but she was softening them with small things like regular bathing, soap and shampoo. I guess you could call Kennedy cute. Rosemary walked past the pair of chairs in front of her older sister's desk, choosing instead to sit atop it at a corner. Maybe adorable is a better word. Of course, a better word for you might be workaholic when you are up here and they are stuck downstairs on a weekend. Glancing back at the report she had thrown on the corner of her desk, Mia knew she couldn't really argue with her on that point, but it still irked her knowing she didn't have a real job. I can be, but I always make time for them. Today, someone messed up, and as well as I'm doing, I can't afford to lose a big client. I have to work hard for what I have. The small shift in tone told Rosemary everything she needed to know about that last statement. I do work hard. I will have you know I started a consultant firm. You touching something hard isn't the same thing, Rosie, and you don't have to give me the consulting line that you like to give when asked what you do for a living in polite society. Hey! Rosemary picked up the name placard off her sister's desk, pointing it at her like it was a weapon. I'm being serious. I started a real business. Mia raised an eyebrow as she sat back in her chair. Yeah? What do you consult on? Well, I have only done this twice now, but I work with places that run conventions. Getting them the right atmosphere to help draw attention to booths to help them sell. Crossing her arms over her chest, Mia gave her sister a hard look. That sounds like a pitch to me, but what do you actually do? Letting out a long sigh, Rosemary continued. I helped out at a boat convention getting attractive young women to be around and did something similar for a comic convention. Rosie, are you pimping other girls out? Mia watched her sister shake her head, waving her hands in front of her, her nameplate still in hand. Rosemary thought for a second on how to answer her sister. She had facilitated a few dates between her models and her clients, and the girls at the boat show were dressed in bikinis, heels and a sailor hats, but she wasn't setting them up to be escorts, not exactly. No. I just have experience in knowing what people want and thought this would be a good way to leverage it to make money. I thought you might actually be proud. Her words trailed off, getting quieter. Reaching up, Mia patted her sister's thigh. What she was doing wasn't exactly running an environmental firm like she did, but it was leaps and bounds better than her having sex for money. She knew it was the oldest profession and in some places it was legal, but it always felt less than moral to her, and it made her worry about her kid sister's safety. Mia also knew it had started when she was safe in an adopted family's home, while Rosie had ended up living on the streets. I am proud of you, I am happy for you, and I will also love you. Wiping away a tear that came to the corner of her eye, Rosemary took a deep breath. Enough of the sappy stuff. She spun the name placard around in her hand so the letters were facing her sister, running her fingers along the words before flipping it back to face herself. President Mia Adams. I want you to take a second and remember your husband. Imagine him coming in here right now and calling you that. Mia hadn't been able to help herself. While her sister was talking, she had hit a few keys to start to reply to an email, trying to multitask, but as she brought up the man she loved, she couldn't help thinking about him. He never told her she was being too bossy, too demanding. Instead, he played along, calling her boss. Yes, boss. Right away, boss. Anything for you, boss. Always with that same dopey smile on his face. She could easily see him holding that same placard, smiling at her, teasing her. A few tears came to her eyes as she started to laugh, thinking about him teasing her for being too serious. After a small fit of laughter, Mia pressed one hand to her chest, giving the red-haired woman sitting on her desk a big smile. Honestly, Rosie, I have been under a lot of stress. Today was supposed to be a relaxing day at the park. I have been making sure I get off on time or early to help Kennedy to adjust. She shook her head. Kennedy has had a rough go of it, and Mia pursed her lips for a second. I am incredibly glad you came to visit. This week has really gotten away from me. We were supposed to go clothes shopping, get a haircut, and I have been putting it off. It has been hard enough having the energy to stay up and play board games or do a puzzle with the three. I love doing it, I really do, but I haven't had the energy to come home and then go out to a store. Looking at her older sibling closer, Rosemary could see she was using concealer to hide the rings under eyes. She was pretty sure her workaholic sister was also staying up late to get things done after the girls went to bed. Sounds like you bit off a little more than you can chew. I can do this, I am doing this. Mia let out another sigh. I need to delegate more around the office so I can focus on what is truly important to me. Rosemary looked around the office, seeing a few awards the small business had earned hung up on a wall proudly. This place is important to you, so do what you can. She gave her sibling a soft smile, doubting she could delegate much with how controlling she could be. While I'm in town, I can help out. Kennedy needs a haircut and some clothes? I can do that for you. The girls will get dinner and I will even put them to bed if you end up having to work late. Rosie, you don't need to. Mia was cut off when her younger sister held up one finger. You do a lot for those girls, let me help. After all, even Wonder Woman needs backup from time to time. Mia scoffed. I'm not Wonder Woman, just a single mother who can't seem to take a break from work. Mia said sadly. Getting off the desk, Rosemary put the nameplate back where she had found it. You work hard, you provide for your family, you make a real effort to spend time with them. I promise to your girls, you are Wonder Woman. I know I would have killed for a mother like you growing up. Touching both hands to her face, Mia wiped the tears away that came down from both eyes. I thought you said no more sappy stuff. Rosemary shrugged her shoulders. Rules for thee, not for me. Besides, I'm the little sister, I can get away with whatever I want. I appreciate you, Rosie. Mia said as she got up, stepping around her desk to give her troublesome sister another hug. Stepping away after the embrace, Rosemary looked into her sister's eyes, waving her hand in the air as if to dismiss what she had said as no big deal. Yeah. She said like it was no big deal, while on the inside she felt incredibly happy. Her older sister was never shy on giving a compliment, but also had no qualms about vocalizing her displeasure. Like she had done time and time again about her life. Today in one sitting she had been told that she was proud of her, that she loved her, and that she appreciated her. At one point in her life she was bitter and jealous of Mia, and in some aspects she still felt envious of what she had, for who she had, but now she was happy. Her life was going in a better direction. If things went well soon enough she could only do her consulting job, no more going by the name Candy, and then maybe she could settle down near her sister and spend time with her two nieces that she loved. Today she was going to spend time with them and her new niece. She was going to get to know the girl and help her get through what was probably a scary time for her if half the stories Mia told her over the phone were true. Well, you have fun doing. She made a motion with her fingers at all the paperwork scattered on her sister's desk around her laptop. I'm going to go kidnap your girls. And Kennedy, Mia added. Rosemary nodded, rolling her eyes at her sister. Yes, that includes Kennedy. Scene 13. It wasn't long before Rosemary came back to the childcare area and signed the three out. Abby had wanted a piggyback ride to the parking lot, something she was happy to provide. Her youngest niece's excitement was the other side of the coin to Kennedy's mood, and it made her heart weep to see the young girl so scared and skittish, and hoped she could help the girl so that she knew things would be better, or at least kindle the hope inside of her. "Okay, girls," Rosemary said as she walked backwards down the tiled hallway as they made their way from the building. "Before dinner we were given a quest." Abby scrunched up her face, clinging to her aunt as she walked backwards while giving her a piggyback ride. "A quest?" Turning her head slightly to see her youngest niece out of the corner of her eye, Rosemary nodded, giving her a bright, toothy smile. "A quest is something you have to do that is really important. Normally only the bravest of knights get to go on quests. Do you think you could help me with one?" To Kennedy it all sounded childish, but seeing the gorgeous woman smile in his direction made much of the world and his own troubles fade away. Pressing his lips together, he swallowed as he gave a few small but vigorous nods in her direction. Despite his mood, it felt almost impossible not to smile at least a little when the freckled beauty looked at him so happily. As if stars were in Abby's eyes, they practically lit up as the girl's jaw hung open with a smile when she thought about the Quest for Camelot movie and the show Mike the Knight. She mouthed the word quest, like if she said it too loudly she would scare it away. While Mackenzie crossed her arms and leaned her head forward. "Are you using the word quest instead of chores?" the young teen asked, suspicious of her aunt. If they had to do something around the house before they got pizza, she would do it, but she wasn't going to be so easily tricked like her sister. With a tight smile, Rosemary shook her head slightly. "No, your mother asked if we could take care of your new sister. She needs a few things, like a haircut. Do you think you could help me watch her and Abby?" Squinting, Mackenzie bit the bottom of her lip before speaking. "I can, but Kennedy won't want to do that." She was ready to elaborate and repeat what she had told her aunt before, about Kennedy not being a girl, but before she could, her aunt asked the dolled-up boy a question. "Kennedy, do you want to go to the mall and get a haircut?" Still walking, Kennedy felt the dress swishing about his legs as he reached up to touch his hair that had the yellow and white Alice band in it. He liked his hair, and it did feel better after being washed by Miss Mia, and he downright melted when she sat behind him to brush it. At the same time, he also knew if it was shorter, much of today's problem wouldn't have happened, and then there was the fact she thought it was all some joke or game that he was a 17-year-old boy. His mind flip-flopped from wanting it cut to not several times, but through all his thinking the woman's gorgeous green eyes stayed on him, patiently waiting for his response. A smile tugged at the corner of his lips as he answered. "Whatever you want," he said dreamily, wondering if he could get her to hug and hold him again. Exasperated that Kennedy wasn't even willing to help himself, Mackenzie huffed. "Fine, sure, we can get my new little sister a haircut. I'm sure she will look cute as can be," the young teenager said with more than a little attitude in her voice as she glared at Kennedy. Glancing behind her, Rosemary stopped walking. Her eldest niece's attitude was plain to see, and the way she was looking at Kennedy made it clear why. She figured Mackenzie might be feeling left out with another person in the household, someone else her mother had to split her attention from. From what she recalled Mia saying, it took Mackenzie little over a month to accept the idea she wasn't an only child. Now it was happening all over again, and the mistreatment and lack of acceptance Kennedy was used to was clear on the younger girl's face with how hurt she looked as she looked back at Mackenzie. All the while Rosemary really had no idea what was going through either of their minds. With a bright idea in her mind, Rosemary helped Abby off her back, sitting her down on her rental car, and she stepped back to look at each of the three girls. "I tell you what, how about while we are at the mall we get your ears pierced? Or in your case, Kenzie, maybe we add a second set of holes in your ears like what I have." Rosemary turned her head to the side, moving some of her hair out of the way to show her niece her triple pierced ear. Pressing her lips together, Mackenzie only held out for a second. She had asked her mom for that before and she had said no. Could I get an earring here too?" she asked, pointing to the upper cartilage of her ear where her aunt had a piercing. "I want one too." Abby happily yelled as she jumped off the car she had been sitting upon. With her youngest daughter's request, Rosemary looked from Abby and then back to Mackenzie. Let's stick to just one extra piercing for now. Or just getting your ears pierced in your case, Abby Bug. What do you think, Kennedy? She asked, wanting to make sure the girl felt included. Oh, yeah. He said, distracted by the yellow 2020 Chevrolet Camaro that Rosemary had sat the brat on. Is that your car? He was fascinated by the muscle car. Glancing behind her again, Rosemary nodded. Yeah, it is a Camaro. It matches your pretty dress. Ignoring the comment about the stupid dress, Kennedy walked up to the car, putting his hand on the yellow painted car. V8, over 400 horsepower. He half whispered, imagining himself driving the car. Rosemary wasn't really knowledgeable about cars, but was surprised a 10-year-old girl was. Sounds about right. Do you like cars, honey? Where did you learn about them? She asked, hoping the girl's fascination stemmed from a happy memory from one of the homes she had been in. Kennedy nodded. I used to read all about them in one of my foster parents' magazines. He used to read them and dream about driving off to freedom. It was a dream that had blossomed into the wish of being a race car driver. How about this then? You can sit in the front seat and tell me all about the cars you love. Rosemary said, seeing the scowl on Mackenzie's face. She had just fixed or started to fix her eldest niece's feelings and had taken a step back. Then on the way to dinner and home, Mackenzie can sit in the front, she is the oldest after all. She expected a protest from Abigail, but the 8-year-old was currently distracted by a plane taking off from the nearby airport. It was on that car ride to the mall where Kennedy happily told the pretty girl about his passion. He had read and reread those magazines over and over again and was completely thrilled to have someone not only ask him about cars, but encouraged him to talk about them. It also helped that he had more than a little crush on the women. So it wasn't until 2013, while it was unveiled in 13, but in 14 this body style came out for the Camaro, and I love it. Kennedy said with high levels of enthusiasm. It wasn't just that the girl's aunt was the first person to ever ask him about cars, it was also the fact that everyone was treating him like a kid, they always had, and this felt like a real adult conversation. Yeah? Well, I love it too, and I love that you have a passion. Never lose that. Rosemary said, smiling and giving the blonde girl in the passenger seat a wink. So tell me, Kennedy, do you have a nickname? Something you go by, or does everyone use your full name? Opening his mouth, Kennedy quickly closed it and looked down at his lap as he touched the tips of his index fingers together. He was about to say everyone calls me Ken, but she already didn't believe him about being a boy. But she did really listen to me just now, screw it. He thought. Everyone called me Ken. You can't be Ken. Abigail called out from the back seat, finally happy they weren't talking about stupid cars. Mackenzie is called Kenzai. Looking in the rearview mirror, Rosemary looked at Abigail. Abby Bug, she can go by Ken if she wants. Biting the inside of her cheek for a second, Mackenzie kicked the back of her seat where Kennedy sat, still very much angry at him for making her aunt think she was lying. Ken sounds too much like a boy's name. How about Kiki? Or Dee Dee? Feeling the back of his seat get kicked, Kennedy grimaced at the feminine names. Dee Dee? Like from Dexter's Lab? Looking in the back seat to Mackenzie, Rosemary was happy she was getting involved and not sulking. Helping pick out a nickname was a good bonding experience. Do you like that cartoon? Nodding his head, he scowled as he felt the seat get kicked again. Yeah, but... He stopped talking as it got kicked a third time. He wanted to climb into the back and hit the girl. He never would, instead he just shut his mouth. Kennedy had learned long ago the best way to not get hit or yelled at was to be as quiet as he could, to be forgotten, and while he gave in to the instances now, they weren't going to assist him this time. Good, then it is settled. From now on we will call you Dee Dee, and soon enough you will be Dee Dee Adams. Reaching over, Rosemary took the young girl's hand in her own. Would you like that, honey? Would you like it if I were your aunt? Feeling her smooth skin on his own hand, Kennedy swallowed hard. It wasn't a romantic touch, but still his male hormones started to rev up. Yeah, he said dreamily, entwining his fingers with the gorgeous woman's. Kennedy held her hand for as long as he could, but had to let go when they had parked. Getting out of the car, he ran around to the other side of the car. The ride had been fun, especially when Rosemary had stopped and revved the engine in an empty part of the parking lot before pressing her foot down all the way on the gas pedal. He didn't even so much as have a learner's permit, and he hoped Miss Mia would take him to get it as soon as this little girl thing passed. For now he was going to keep up the act. There would be a reckoning when everything came out, but that was a problem for future him, he figured. Past me is always a problem and future me is a sucker. He thought briefly about some of his encounters in the homes he had been in. Purposely breaking a vase or a lamp because of the way he was treated, only for his actions to cause even more problems. He didn't want to do any of that here, even though the idea of putting on girls' panties earlier that morning had put more than a few ideas in his head on how to get back at people. It wasn't until the group had gotten to their first destination that Kennedy realized what he had agreed to. He thought the girls were just talking about getting their ears pierced for themselves. Kendi did have a piercing. It was in his eyebrow. He had done it himself, but had taken it out to get good and clean on one of the first days in the Adams household and hadn't been able to find it since, but what they were wanting to do was different. Don't worry, Dee Dee, it doesn't really hurt. Abby didn't have any problems, did you, Abby Bug? Rosemary turned her head from Kennedy as she looked to her youngest niece, who now sported a pair of pearl stud earrings that matched the ones in Mackenzie's ears. Turning her head from left to right, Abigail pointed to each of her newly pierced ears with a wide smile on her face. Nope. I didn't cry at all. She had teared up a little as the older teen girl got closer to her with the piercing gun, but she hadn't cried, and that was all that was important. Sitting in the chair, it was then Kennedy felt someone take his left hand on their own. Turning his head, he saw the aqua-colored eyes of Mackenzie. She was holding his palm in one hand and patting the top of his hand with her other as she spoke. You can do this, Dee Dee, I'm here for you. She sounded sweet, but it felt patronizing. Rosemary gave her eldest niece a smile and a wink so she knew that she was appreciated. Wrangling all three, while trying to support each emotionally, was a large chore for her. Abigail needed to be treated in a way that she felt she was getting the attention she deserved, that was different from how Mackenzie wanted to be treated. She needed to be included and spoken to like she was an adult or close to it, and Kennedy needed to be treated with a mix of supportiveness so she knew she could rely on her. The young girl also needed firmness because she was so unsure of herself. Rosemary had no problem doing it, but it felt exhausting as much as it did rewarding. From her experience, the little she had is that most kids didn't have a lot of empathy, and here she saw Mackenzie showing just that with her new sister. Mackenzie had come a long way from being that 4-year-old that dumped her little sister out of her baby carrier and crawling into it. Holding the 13-year-old girl's hand, Kennedy winced and squeezed it a little as he felt a pinch to one of his ears. He told himself he was a man and could take it. He wasn't going to tear up like the little brat, and he hadn't, but he couldn't keep himself from wincing before each time his ear was stabbed. In the end, he had the same real pearl earrings as the two Adams girls. Getting down from the chair, he gently touched each of his earlobes. They stung a little, but it mostly felt odd from the weight now hanging from them. Having earrings wasn't that big of a deal, a lot of guys got them. They just didn't wear pearls, that was something only girls did. Come here, Rosemary said, wrapping up Kennedy in a hug like she had done with each of her nieces after they got their ears pierced. The only difference between them was Mackenzie got the pearl earrings in her existing holes and a new heart-shaped stud in the new ones. Now I need you to take good care of your new earrings. They are a special gift from me to all of my nieces to show how much I trust and love each of you, she said, not wanting to bring up the cost of them. As they grew older, they would learn that on their own and appreciate the gift that much more. She had just met the girl, felt for her on a deep level with their shared experiences of the woes from being in the adoption system. It wasn't love, not yet, but she could easily see herself adoring the bright blue-eyed girl. Just hearing her go on and on about her passion had taken her partially there. Even with her clients, her favorite part of any of them talking is if they went on about their passion. Everyone was always happier when they talked about their special subject. She didn't really have one of those, no hobby or cause that brought that passion. The only thing she had was her sister and her nieces, and that was more than enough for her. The older woman was a good 8 inches taller than him, but when she hugged him he was happy to press his face into her soft bosom. Wrapping his arms around her, he squeezed her back, wanting the moment to both never end and wishing she would see him for a man and visit in his new bedroom. She doesn't love me, no one does, but she did just spend almost $400 on earrings for the 3 of us. She spent the same on me as she did her nieces. Why would she do that? Do you really care about me? He asked while his mind answered the question. How could she? She thinks you are a little girl, and even if she saw the real you, you know no one cares about you. The question felt more like the girl saw through her lie. She just met the girl, no one loved her, how could she? Holding her tighter, Rosemary rocked her small body from side to side. You are a good person, Dee Dee, and I promise to always care about you. You are worthy of love, you are worthy. She whispered in the girl's ear, saying the words she wished had been told to her many years ago when she felt worthless. Kennedy may have promised himself he wasn't going to cry because he was a boy, a young man when his ears were stabbed, but hearing those words caused a flood of tears to come to his eyes. Pressing his face as hard as he could into her, this time it wasn't about enjoying her feminine aspects, but because of the tears in his eyes. Shaking his head, he physically denied what she was saying. How could he really be worthy of anything? If he had, then he wouldn't have been passed from home to home, beaten, ignored or ridiculed. I'm not the dolled-up boy said in a weak voice as tears kept on coming. Shoo, shhh. Rosemary continued to rock the girl. She felt out of her element. As an escort, she would sometimes just be there to keep someone company and listen. Most of the time it was just sex, but calming down a blubbering girl that didn't think she was worthy of anything, that she had no experience with. No one had been there to tell her she was worthy. She had to figure that out on her own, had to feel she earned it, and even now as she tried running her own business she still struggled with those same feelings. Feeling the need to get a client, to make them happy, to make herself feel like she deserved love, and here she was trying to convince a girl of something she didn't even always believe about herself. It's okay, it's okay. Tears still flowing from his eyes, Kennedy felt the woman he was crying on pull away. The cool, air-conditioned air of the mall blew across his tear-streaked face. He felt Rosemary's hands, one was on his shoulder and the other held his chin, making it so he had to look her in the eye. He really enjoyed looking into her eyes, and didn't want her to see him crying like some baby. Kennedy tried to hold them back as he sniffled. That was when he felt someone hugging him from behind. The small arms told him it was Abby, and shortly after that he felt his upper arm squeezed from Mackenzie. I promise you, you are worthy of love. You are a beautiful girl with an older sister and younger that will be there for you. Mia. Rosemary paused to correct herself. She wanted the girl to feel like this wasn't just a family, but her family. Your new mom and your much prettier and younger aunt will be there for you too, she said, making small good-natured digs at her sister who wasn't here to defend herself. Okay? She watched the sniffling girl nod her head before she continued. Now let's dry those tears so we can go get you a haircut so you can be as pretty as you can be," she said before hugging the girl one more time. This time she was joined by both of her nieces, making her feel proud of them. Kennedy hugged them back, not just Rosemary, but each of the girls. He had thrown away the glittery poster they made him on more than one occasion. Each time when he wasn't paying attention it ended up back on his wall over the bed. He had resisted them, but they had been welcoming of him in their home. It didn't diminish how bratty they could be, but it was a far cry from one of the ones he had stayed at where he was yanked from his bed the first night he was there so an older boy could take his blanket and pillow. Kennedy didn't want to be dressed as a girl, didn't want to be thought of as some baby. Those were some steep downsides, but right now he felt something he couldn't remember having before: love. It made him think of his real parents. Scene 14. After Kennedy's tears had run its course he felt completely drained. The day had felt like it was going on forever. "I'm wearing clothes that belong to an 8. He mentally stumbled on the number, instantly replacing it with a 9 after hearing the energetic brat say she was almost 9 so many times. "She may be almost 9, but everyone thinks I'm a 10-year-old girl. This day is just so." His thought on how terrible the day was paused as he looked at the freckle-faced redhead that wanted to be called Aunt Rose or Rosie. Kennedy thought how he was almost a man, and wanted to do manly things with her, and all she saw was a little girl. That was terrible, but how she had been talking to him made him feel happy in a way he couldn't explain. He wanted to hold on to that feeling of love and was afraid it would disappear if she found out the truth. So he kept his mouth shut and followed her as the small group walked into a salon. "Hello there," a chipper 20-something woman said as she waved her hands at the group of 4 walking in. "I'm Dottie. How can I help you lovely ladies today?" As Rosemary walked up to the counter, Abigail spoke up, pointing to a jar of cheap lollipops on the counter. "Can I have one?" Glancing down at her youngest niece, Rosemary gave the girl her best stern expression, before turning her attention back to the person behind the register. "We appreciate the warm greeting. We have an appointment for my niece Ken." She started to say the girl's name before remembering how she wanted to go by the nickname. "Dee Dee, her hair has gotten a bit unruly, and if you could please forgive my niece Abby here, she sometimes forgets her manners when she gets excited." "Abby, that was a little rude. Do you want to try again?" Rosemary asked, raising an eyebrow. Puffing one cheek out for half a second, Abby nodded. "I'm Abigail, but everyone calls me Abby, and I would love it if I..." Abby looked at her sister and Kennedy. "We would love it if we could have a lollipop, please." Staying silent, Kennedy didn't want some kid's lollipop, but he also didn't want any more attention. Crying like a baby in front of the girls had been mortifying enough, and he figured if she gave out the candy he could just hold onto it to bribe the loudest of the girls later, or at least use it to keep her from talking for a bit. The female behind the counter caught his full attention when she clapped her hands together once. She looked like she could be close to 6 foot with how she towered over everyone, and if that wasn't enough to make her stand out, her long blonde hair that went down to almost her waist had been dyed pink at the ends. This woman was just another attractive woman with her sea green eyes and her freckled rosy cheeks. Whatever she had been saying was lost on him as he admired the pretty Amazon. All the talking was really lost on him till he felt Aunt Rosie touch his shoulder. He questioned as he blinked his eyes, trying to reassert his focus. "Honey, you are going to go with Dottie here and she is going to trim your hair a little. I'm going to take your sisters over to the bookstore and we'll be back before you are done. I was thinking about picking you up a book on cars. Would that be okay?" "Book on cars?" Yes. Yes, please." It took his mind a second to catch up to the notion that she was asking him if it was okay to buy him something and that it was his favorite topic. She had been listening to me. He thought, a smile coming to his face. "Great, we will be back in a jiffy. Just be a good girl and do what Miss Dottie says, okay?" The phrase "be a good girl" pressed down on him like a weight, but he wasn't sure he could say no to the green-eyed beauty. "I will. Don't worry about Dee Dee, I'm sure we will get along famously," the hairstylist said to the younger girl's aunt before whispering to the young blonde. "The Adventures of Dee Dee and Dottie, I just love the way it sounds. It could be a Saturday morning cartoon." "Great," Kennedy thought, giving the Amazonian woman a small smile and a nod. His mind was completely at odds of wanting her to easily see that he wasn't some little girl and really hoping that she didn't. Her accepting his nod as a response to her cartoon idea, Kennedy followed her over to the plush wood and purple riveted salon chair where she wrapped a pinkish purple smock over him. Looking at it, he was sure Mackenzie would like to have it wrapped around her much more than himself. Not that he felt like he had much of a choice. "Could you, cut it all off like I mean? Make it short?" "Short? Like a pixie cut or more like a boy's haircut?" Dottie asked as she opened up a book to show the girl an example of a pixie haircut. Her aunt had said to just take care of the split ends and even everything out, but she always wanted to hear what her client actually liked. When the freckled woman said boy's haircut, Kennedy's eyes bugged out. Yes, he wanted a haircut like a boy. He was a boy. He liked having long hair. He loved how Miss Mia took the time brushing it. That and her hugs were some of the best moments of his life recently, but without the long hair part of all this girly stuff could stop. Or at least that is what he had thought when he asked. When she asked to confirm, it set off alarms in his mind. If she cuts my hair like that, she will know I'm actually a boy, and then so will everyone. Shit, shit, shit. Think, man. No, not like a boy's, he said, holding his breath to see if she bought it. How about we just give you a trim today, and next time you can come in with a picture of what you want. You can come in and we can have another little adventure. How does that sound? I like adventures, Kennedy said weakly, his fingers fidgeting underneath the smock. Getting the haircut itself wasn't any special trial, but Kennedy gave a weak smile when he saw his foster family come back into the salon with bags. It grew in volume when he saw Mackenzie pulling out a book and holding it up for him to see, the title reading 100 Cars That Changed the World. Kennedy's eyes lingered on the red 488 Pista on the book's cover and couldn't wait to get his hands on it. His attention was pulled back to the stylist as she turned his chair so that he was facing a mirror. Here we go. Tell me, what do you think? No, wait, hold on, Dottie said, picking up the girl's yellow headband from her workstation and putting it back in place. We didn't do much today, just like your aunt wanted, but next time we can do something special if you like. Maybe one more thing, she said, moving in front of the girl and brushing on a little bit of lip gloss onto her lips and then added some eyeliner. It wasn't a lot of makeup, but if her customer was anything like her at that age, then she was always playing with her mother's makeup. A little bit of makeup makes us all feel at least a little pretty, and you, Dee Dee, are way more than a little. Kennedy's eyes became pinpoints as he focused on himself in the mirror. There hadn't been any drastic changes. His hair now just barely touched his shoulders. It looked shiny and healthy. The bangs that framed his face were a bit different, so was seeing the pearl earrings on him, along with the shine and light flavor of strawberries coming from his lips. His words trailing off as he swallowed hard. You love it, I knew you would, Dottie said, bouncing in a way that drew Kennedy's eyes to her in the mirror. All right then, let's get your cape off so you can go show your sisters how pretty you look. With little choice, Kennedy got off the chair and to his Mary Jane encased feet, the cold air from the mall salon blowing up the skirt of the yellow dress, sending a shiver down his spine as he made his way over to his foster family. Oh, you look pretty, Dee Dee, Abigail said, now much more positive Kennedy had been lying before about being 17 and being a boy. The young girl's words caused Kennedy to cast his eyes down as a blush came to his cheeks. Looking as he was, he didn't see the older of the two come closer and whisper to him. Just tell Aunt Rosie the truth. Without looking up, Kennedy shook his head. Fine, I am sorry about everything, but if you don't want to tell the truth, you can be my little sister. She continued to whisper before speaking louder. Dee Dee, I'm jealous. Aunt Rosie, can I wear some makeup too? The question only made his blush deepen. Oh. And I picked this out for you, Mackenzie said, handing the book over. Squatting down to be closer to eye level with the blonde girl, Rosemary touched her chin to get her to look up. You know, Dottie did an amazing job, but I don't think she was right about you being pretty. Dee Dee, I think you are beautiful. Now what do you say to Miss Dottie? The question was for Kennedy, but Abby spoke up. Thank you. Can I have another lollipop? She wasn't talking to you and you already had one. Mackenzie chided her sister, while Kennedy really just wanted to crawl into a hole and maybe get another hug from his foster aunt. Thank you, the feminized boy said in a small voice, his eyes only looking up to the pretty stylist for a heartbeat. The idea of someone that looked like her, so pretty and daring with her dyed pink-tipped hair, saying she wanted to have an adventure sounded like it could be a dream, but the fact that she only saw him as a girl made it something much darker. It has been an absolute pleasure meeting you, Dee Dee, Dottie said before turning her attention to the girl's aunt. Anyone else want to come sit in my chair today? Or shall we settle up? While Rosemary paid the bill, Abby poked one of her small fingers into his side as she gave her sibling a hard look. You shouldn't lie. Shoo. He made the sound, holding a finger to his lips while he clutched the book to his chest with his other hand. With a cocky smirk, Mackenzie bobbed her head from side to side, proud that her little sister agreed with her. Yeah, not telling the truth only gets you in more trouble. Nodding her head vigorously, Abby agreed with her older sister. Yeah, you can't just tell people you are way older than you are. I can't just say I'm 9. Because I'm not, I'm almost 9. Pausing, Mackenzie turned her head slowly to look into her younger sister's green eyes. That isn't. She looked between the two shorter blondes now on either side of her as she adjusted her stance. Sure, that is the problem. I give up. What do you give up? Rosemary asked, now finished paying the bill. Exasperated, Mackenzie let loose a heavy sigh. That Kennedy is a 17-year-old boy. Yep, Abby said supportively. Looking between the three, a light giggle came from Rosemary's mouth. Yes, well, I will get that straightened out too, but first. She paused, trying to make eye contact with each girl's eyes. Her gaze shifting from Kenzie's blue-green eyes to Abby's green eyes and finally Dee Dee's blue, trying to have a dramatic pause. It is time to go clothes shopping. Dee Dee needs just about everything from what I understand, but I can't go shopping without getting each of you at least something. So you too, she said, pointing to her blood relations. Get to pick out one outfit each, so pants and blouse, or a skirt or even a dress, but only so long as you promise to be patient and help Dee Dee pick out things to fill her closet. Tilting her head to the side, Mackenzie looked over at the dress-wearing boy and raised an eyebrow, only to see him shake his head again at her unspoken question. So she gave a shrug before answering her aunt. I would super happy to pick out pretty dresses for Dee Dee, and don't worry about me, Auntie, I don't need anything. Scene 15. The group had moved from the salon in the mall to one of the big department stores and right over to the Little Miss section, where Kennedy's eyes practically glazed over at what he presumed was a sea of lace and cutesy girly things. At his 5'0" height, he had never been able to shop in the men's department, not that he had a lot of experience shopping for clothes at all. Most of the time he had given hand-me-downs from another foster kid. The last family he had been with had a new pair of jeans and 4 t-shirts waiting for him when he arrived. That had really been the only good thing about that home. So being taken shopping for what was described as a closet full of clothes was a new experience, one he would have been happy to have if they had been in the boys' section instead. With every passing minute he felt like things were getting worse, Abby picking out a puffy white skirt that would come down almost to his knees. Rosemary, or Aunt Rosie, had gushed at how cute the tulle skirt would look, and instantly it was the first thing added to the collection of clothes that only grew. He wanted to glare daggers at the red-headed brat as she held up a yellow long-sleeve cotton blouse that was cut to expose his shoulders, but he didn't feel like he had the strength of will to even muster that. "Kendi," Mackenzie whispered harshly through clenched teeth. She was feeling incredibly frustrated with her foster brother. She had fun earlier in the day, but she didn't feel much like playing anymore. "Tell Aunt Rosie the truth." "I can't, she didn't believe me, Anne." "I can't." Kennedy knew he could even prove he was a man, well, a teenage boy. He didn't exactly know what a girl looked like without their underwear on, but he knew that girls didn't have what he had between their legs. Doing that, though, would make her mad. In foster homes he had met people that were nice, or acted nice, and as soon as you made them angry things changed in a bad way. Not once had he met someone like a girl's aunt or their mom. They really did seem nicer than anyone he had been with, but he also hadn't made them really angry, not yet, and he knew what would happen then. Back he would go, or maybe even to juvenile hall where his last caseworker had said he was going to go for being a horrible brat. They deserved what they got. The dress-wearing boy thought darkly. I can't, Mackenzie. Could you just help me without making her mad at me?" Squirting her eyes at Kennedy for a second before squeezing them closed, the young teen girl let out another long sigh. The kind she often reserved for dealing with her little sister when she was purposely being a problem. "She isn't going to be mad, well, maybe a little, but would you rather put on this pretty blouse? Or tell her the truth so we can get you some boy clothes?" Kennedy's heart sank at the question. It wasn't just because he was positive he would be sent packing if the truth came out now. It wasn't his fault any of this happened. He tried to tell them, he tried to tell everyone, mostly. But not being at fault didn't mean you didn't get in trouble, or get the belt. He had learned that lesson more than once. That was only part of the reason her words caused mental pain. The other part was because the girl's aunt seemed to have perfect timing to show up to hear things he wished she didn't. "Why would you want boys' clothes, honey?" Rosemary asked, thinking the girl might just be thinking about getting some pants. Her eldest niece hadn't worn a skirt for longer than a few minutes once she was old enough to choose what she wore. Raising an eyebrow in Kennedy's direction, Mackenzie once more saw the short boy shake his head. "Fine, if he wants to look like a girl, then that is what will happen." Shifting herself slightly, Mackenzie held the blouse up to Kennedy's chest as she spoke to her aunt. "Dee Dee was telling me that all she was really given was boys' clothes, and was saying how she hoped she didn't have to do that anymore." With wide eyes, Kennedy looked between the two redheads rapidly before he settled on the 13-year-old brat. "Why did you tell her that?" Not for the first time today, Rosemary felt her heart break. She understood where the girl was coming from, but it was clear they didn't share every experience. "It's okay, honey," Rosemary said, putting her hand on the girl's shoulder, her hand sliding down till she had the girl's smaller hand in her own. "Kenzie is just trying to help. I promise we all just want to help you the best we can." "Yeah, I'm just trying to help," Mackenzie said, stressing each word, thinking at this point if he wouldn't tell the truth on his own or back her up, then she would just push him till he cracked. When he had first shown up at their door, she had done her best to be welcoming, and thought despite being a shorty he was cute, but the longer she dealt with him the more her little crush faded away. I don't need any help and don't need you to buy me any clothes," he said, pushing the yellow blouse away from himself. "Don't spend any money on me, I'm fine." Rosemary's eyes grew softer. She just wanted to pick the girl up and hold her and tell her things would get better over and over again till she knew it was true. That feeling of not wanting to be a burden on someone, because they would want something from you, was a familiar one. Still holding her hand, Rosemary pulled her once more into a large hug. You deserve to be taken care of, you deserve love. You are not a burden, and I promise that we all are here for you. The moment was a heartwarming one. Mackenzie wasn't sure what was going through Kennedy's head as her aunt hugged him, but seeing the deep blush come to his cheeks caused her to roll her eyes. Now, we are going to get you some things today, and if I have my way you will be just as spoiled as Kenzie and Abby. You are going to let me lavish you with gifts, got it? Kennedy nodded his head as it was pressed up against her soft chest. Yeah. Like the book? Pulling back from the girl, Rosemary kept her arms on her as she nodded and smiled. Give me a little time and I will fill up a bookshelf for you. For now, though, we need to go into the changing room. I have something every growing girl needs. In a slight daze, Kennedy followed the attractive woman. In her tight workout pants, his eyes would have normally been glued to her rear end, but his mind was too distracted with the promise to not just buy him another book like she had, but to fill up an entire bookshelf for him. The idea felt ridiculous. The one book that was now sitting in the bag with whatever the girls got at the bookstore was an amazing gift, but who would buy someone like him that many books? It wasn't until the door to the changing room closed that he paid attention to what was going on. Aunt Rosie had been talking and he had just been nodding along, and now she was pulling up on the yellow dress he had been wearing. Hands up, Dee Dee, let's get this off you so you can try your training bra. What? I don't need a bra. Come on, she said gently, tugging up on the dress till she was able to get it over the girl's head. I know you don't need a bra, not yet, but soon you will be seeing other girls your age blossoming to become women. Your big sister Kenzie is already wearing one. Yeah, but she is a girl and I'm not going to ever grow tits. He panicked, seeing her pick up a peach and pink piece of fabric that looked like a belly shirt version of a boy's A-frame undershirts. It may seem like it now, but before you know it you will have to wear a full bra yourself. Your body will change in ways you can't imagine. Like... Shaking his head as rapidly as he could, Kennedy snatched the garment from her hands. I don't need to hear about that, he said with desperation in his voice, knowing exactly where the conversation was going, and he did not want to hear about girls peeing blood. It is only natural, honey. Here, let me show you. Rosemary then removed her purple tank top, revealing her purple and black lace bra. Kennedy was already putting on the stupid feminine garment, afraid she was going to continue, but as the sight of her breasts came into view his pupils became pinpoints. A heavy blush came to his cheeks, and his hands went down to block the front of the panties he wore so she wouldn't see him getting hard. See? As you get older. A few minutes later, Kennedy stood in the center of the changing room in a daze after the green-eyed beauty talked to him about the wonders of womanhood he would soon experience. He had nowhere to go, and with her topless, or nearly so, she had his full attention. The topic was embarrassing. He remembered the girls being separated from the boys to go over sex education, but even then he hadn't really learned anything. It was mostly just the boys making jokes. Now he just stood through a short lecture on him blossoming into a woman, as she put it. Even with his cheeks constantly red from a blush that didn't go away, he would have listened to her talk about the different colors of paint or types of grass so long as she stayed standing there with him without her shirt on. Now left with multiple hangers that had skirts, blouses and dresses on them, he was left with instructions to try them on while she went to look for more things. Slowly he sat down on the little stool, breathing heavily and trying to think unsexy thoughts so his erection would go away, and thanking his lucky stars she hadn't noticed. Exiting the changing room, now fully dressed again, Rosemary had her lips pressed into a line as she thought about her discussion. 10 years old was probably too young for the talk she just had, and it was clear the girl was uncomfortable and embarrassed. Dee Dee had a constant blush and had been holding her privates, like just talking about periods would cause it to happen and that she could hold it back. Though she also knew kids in foster care didn't get the education they should, and it just seemed natural to transition from talking about her chest growing to that. Overall, she thought it went well and wondered how that same conversation went between her sister Mia and Kenzie. Stepping out into the aisle between clothing racks, her thoughts were interrupted by her youngest and blonde niece as she held up a few articles of clothing. "Can I get these?" she said, her voice full of excitement, in her hands a skirt that matched the one she had picked out for Dee Dee and a pink baby doll t-shirt with an outline of a white cat. "Looks like someone wants to match her sister," Rosemary said with a smile, imagining Abby had picked out the tulle white skirt for Dee Dee because she wanted it. "Yeah. Those look good, Abby Bug. Why don't you find Kenzie and show her, and then you can go try them on?" With the girl darting off like a rocket, Rosemary started to browse the shelves and racks once more, well aware that at some point she had picked up an admirer. He was a man who looked to be low to mid-20s, around her own age of 25 she guessed. He was blonde with a neatly kept short hairstyle, a trimmed blonde beard and deep blue eyes, and was about her height of 5'8" or just slightly more. Being checked out by a man wasn't new to her, and with her upbringing it often felt good to get attention, even if it was the negative type. She was looking for clothes in the young miss department, and considering the blonde man in blue jeans and a white t-shirt wasn't looking at the clothes at all, she figured he was just here to ogle her. Bending over to sort through some girls' shorts on a low shelf, she gave her but a little wiggle. "I shouldn't be doing this when I'm out with the girls. I'm not working while I'm here, but I did and am spending a lot more than I expected. Maybe I should do a little work on the side?" Rosemary asked herself. She had no intention of picking up this guy as a client, not when she was out with her family, but having his attention on her body had reminded her that splurging on Dee Dee to make her feel at home and cared for was going to hit her bank account. Walking down the aisle, Reagan had been heading to the men's department to pick up a new tie after accidentally spilling some mustard on the only tie he had brought on his trip up north from Florida. He had been thumbing through emails on his phone, mentally gripping about the never-ending asks and favors people wanted in the political world, when all of it seemed to fade away when caught sight of a scarlet-haired freckled woman with the most eye-catching green eyes he had ever seen. He found himself following her, mesmerized like a child following the Pied Piper, his attention only becoming more focused as she bent over and shook her ass in his direction. It wasn't until he saw her pick up a pair of white child-sized shorts with a pink flower on the back pocket that he took notice of exactly where he was. Picking up someone at a department store in a kiddie section wasn't exactly his normal, but he had also never been the shy type. "What kind of alpha would I be if I didn't pursue my prey?" he asked himself before clearing his throat. "Excuse me, I was hoping you could help me out," he said, a plan already forming in his head after he noticed a much younger redhead girl in the vicinity. Shacking up with a sexy MILF like her on his business trip hadn't been in his original plan when coming to the mall, but he was sure happy he had only brought one tie with him now. Rosemary made the sound as she snapped back up from her bent position instinctually as she felt the man's roaming eyes, thinking he had already undressed her with them. "Looking for something in your size? Might have the wrong department, but I'm happy to help you find something pretty," she said, giving the man a sweet, pretend innocent smile. Hee hee. Reagan laughed. "I think I already found something pretty," he said, giving the girl his best. "I was actually here to find a tie and seem to have gotten lost. Any chance you could show me the way to the men's department? I was never one of those guys that refused to stop and ask for directions." Raising an eyebrow at the flirting man, Rosemary was about to respond when Mackenzie walked up, holding a black and pink skater dress in her hands. It made her smile. Her niece was plenty feminine, not a tomboy, but she really didn't like wearing dresses and skirt. Seeing her with one made her happy, not because she wanted to force her into something, but because she was willing to expand her horizons, and she loved dolling her nieces up. Glancing at the man talking to her, Aunt Mackenzie gave the man a slight nod before speaking. "Aunt Rosie, I was thinking of this for Dee Dee, but she isn't answering or coming out from the changing room." Nodding once, Rosemary gave the man a small shrug of her shoulders. "I'm sorry, but my nieces need my help. I think if you follow the path and read the signs you can find what you are looking for." "You can read the signs, right?" Tilting his head back, Reagan gave the beauty a grin. I believe I can read the signs just fine. I'm Reagan, by the way, Reagan Demir. I'm only in town for a few days, let me get your phone number. I would love to get the chance to know the beautiful lass behind that smile. Lass? That is a new one, but afraid not. I'm only in town to spend time with family, and before you ask, after shopping we are going out to dinner. Completely booked. His eyes flicked to the younger version of the woman. He could have sworn they were mother and daughter, but Aunt was just as good. Aunt could mean she was actually unattached, and he was sure she was flirting back with him. Not the type to take a refusal, he pushed on, adjusting his tactics. Completely understand, family always comes first. I'm an uncle myself, have 2 nephews to my eldest sister. You said you were going out to eat, how about Chuck E. Cheese, place where your nieces can eat and play? They can have fun and the 2 of us could have a chance to get to know one another. My treat. Figuring out what was going on, a mischievous smile came to Mackenzie's face. Her mother was single, but she once had her daddy. While her favorite and only aunt never even had a boyfriend that she could remember. Chuck E. Cheese sounds fun. She blurted out, already seeing the rebuttal forming on her aunt's lips. Kenzie. Rosemary said before her eldest niece called out to her sister, who must have been close by. Abby. Do you want to go to Chuck E. Cheese? Almost jumping through a rack of clothes, wearing the outfit she had just asked her aunt if she could buy, Abby had a wide open mouthed grin, her arms flung up into the air. Yes. I want pizza and tokens. Abby bug. Rosemary said with a sigh in her voice, hating that she was about to tell them both no, that they were not going there with some stranger. Though she supposed she could tell the man no and then take them there anyways. Aunt Rosie, did you know I went there for my 7th birthday? I got Chucky to dance with me and I asked Mommy if I could get a mouse as a pet, she said no, but then I asked for a guinea pig and she still said no, but then Chucky gave me some extra tokens to go play games and it was so much fun, except when my friend Beth got sick, but she already said she wasn't feeling good when she came and Mommy said that her mom shouldn't have let her come if she was sick and throwing up because it would make others sick, but I was fine, but Kenzie didn't feel well the next day, but she wasn't throwing up, so I think it was different, but I helped Mommy make her chicken noodle soups and she felt better. Putting his hand over his mouth for a moment to help contain a laugh, Reagan did his best to compose himself after the tiny girl went on a rant. It sounds like we got 2 votes, but I'm not the type to try and force someone into anything. You said you were just in town to visit family, so neither of us are from here. I would really love to get to know you, but picking someone up like this isn't exactly an ideal situation. Why don't you take your nieces there? It looks like I got them worked up. So let me give you some money, you can take them out on me. I think there is a decent burger joint in the food court, eating alone isn't a new one. Aunt Rosie, don't make him eat alone. Mackenzie said, before whispering to her aunt louder than she intended. I think he likes you. Pressing her lips together, Rosemary looked at her niece, practically feeling the aura of mischief coming off of her. The 2 shared a hair color, but the girl reminded her of Mia when she was younger. Do the 2 of you want to go to Chuck E. Cheese? She asked, feeling defeated, already knowing the answer. Yes, it sounds like fun. Mackenzie answered. No, I don't want to go. I need to go. I haven't seen Chucky in forever and I promised him I would be back. Abigail said with enough drama to win an overacting award. All right, go ask your sister. After we finish up trying on clothes we can have Reagan here buy us dinner. That is if he is okay, waiting. We would understand if he didn't have the time. With a small shake of his head, Reagan kept his normal smirk plastered on his face. I have no problem waiting, still need to get that tie after all. Say. He turned his attention to the Rugrats. If I bring over a few ties, do you think the two of you could help me pick out the right one for an important meeting I have tomorrow? He asked them, his eyes flickering over to the only other adult in view. Oh, and I heard them calling you Aunt Rosie, any chance I could have your name? With a half smile on her face, Rosemary nodded. If she happened to run into someone that she thought could be a client out and about, she would have told them her name was Candy, but that was a life she never intended to come close to her nieces. Even if she did, Mia would string her up for even considering it. I'm Rosemary, most people call me Rose. This here is Mackenzie, and the ball of energetic drama is Abby. Don't forget Dee Dee, Abby said helpfully. Yes. Rosemary acknowledged the girl. My niece in the changing room is Dee Dee. Abby, that outfit looks good on you. Why don't you run off to change back and ask Dee Dee if she is okay with what we picked for dinner or if she wants to go someplace else? When she said that last part, she met Reagan's blue eyes. The man was attractive enough, not a big muscled egomaniac man. He seemed affable enough, but would take them out if Dee Dee wasn't comfortable in a second. Scene 16. Sitting in the booth, Kennedy looked down at his hands in his lap as his legs swung freely as they dangled down. He paid little attention to the animatronic band that played up on the stage. He cared little for the childish entertainment, nor for the fact he was still wearing a dress and, even worse now, a training bra underneath. Don't say anything, be small, don't be noticed, he told himself, not wanting to draw even the slightest attention from the blonde man that had joined them at the restaurant. Back at the store, when he still had refused to answer the brats or try on any of the clothes, the youngest one, Abby, had taken measures into her own hands. She had literally gotten down on her hands and knees and crawled under the changing room's door. Seeing her pop into the small room had startled him, and to get her out he quickly agreed to whatever the little terrorist wanted, but saying he was done trying on the clothes had only worked out to the full load of them being bought, and now sitting across from yet another adult that would only see him as a child, and things seemed to only get worse from there. He obviously liked Aunt Rosie with how he flirted, and it looked like it was reciprocated with how she laughed or giggled. There was little to no chance someone like her would ever be with him, even in a year when he was 18, but seeing how easily she somehow picked up a date while out clothes shopping did little for what remained of his ego. So, what toppings do you girls like on your pizza? Reagan asked, knowing it mattered little with the low quality of the food that was offered at a place like this. He had gone to one of these places only once, for one of his nephew's birthdays when he had been up in New York, and unless they had made some dramatic changes to how they made things, then he was in store for some pizza-flavored cardboard, but it was an easy price to pay if he got what he wanted. Pepperoni, Abby said in nothing close to an inside voice. Mackenzie gave the bearded man a weak smile at her little sister's antics. She loved the idea of her aunt randomly stumbling into a man as she took care of them, him offering to pay for all of their dinner, and the two falling in love. It felt like one of the stories she read. The only thing that was missing was him protecting them all from a bad guy. The man, Reagan, didn't look like one of those big tough guys. He had big blue eyes, the same eyes she felt herself falling for in Kennedy before she got to know her new brother, or sister if things kept up. Unlike Kennedy, Reagan had an easy smile that she just knew her Aunt Rosie would love. She likes to pull the pepperoni off to eat them before she eats her then cheese pizza. Oh, I see, Reagan said, rocking his head back. In his line of work they called this kissing babies. Interact with the young and feign as much interest as you could to get them smiling. Kids smiling around you was always great for photos, the polls, and what he was going for this time, the ladies. You know, I do that too sometimes, he said conspiratorially, giving what he was told the youngest of the group a wink, before giving his attention to the little red-headed girl. Reagan had always been good with names and making friends. The key was playing to what people wanted. The eldest girl seemed to want to be mature, or at least seen that way. The middle child was quiet and seemed happy to be ignored. Something he could understand with her older sister's desire to be in charge and her younger sister's need for attention. Mackenzie, It sounds like you have a good idea of what your sisters want. Why don't you order for them and... He gave a small shrug of his shoulder. And us too. He then glanced over to Rose to see if she would disagree, but was happy to see her smiling. Rosemary was pleasantly surprised to see how easy Reagan was interacting with the girls. He hadn't said much to Dee, but she hadn't said much to anyone. She imagined the girl felt overwhelmed with getting so much at the mall. Rosemary knew that once upon a time she would have been blown away by something like that happening, and she was positive the girl still didn't feel like she deserved it, something she would have to continue to work on. That sounds fine. Kenzie, if you could order me a Diet Coke, I would appreciate it. Rosemary said, making eye contact with her niece and motioning to her new little sister before putting down her laminated menu. Hey, Mackenzie said in a soft voice as she bumped her shoulder into the dress-wearing boy. What do you like on your pizza? The only response she received was a shrug of his shoulders. He hadn't even bothered to look up from his lap. No shrugging or I will ask for 'em. Green peppers. Do you like green peppers? She asked, having to rub her tongue on her teeth to try and scrape away the phantom flavor of the disgusting things. I like bacon, Kennedy said, flicking his eyes to the girl for just a moment, wishing he had brought his new book in here to read instead of having to interact with others and most of all not see the blonde guy who could actually grow a beard flirt with Aunt Rosie. It was so unfair. If he could grow a beard, anything really, then maybe people would see him for a man. He liked to imagine himself getting out of a NASCAR, pulling off his helmet, brushing one hand through his thick-trimmed beard as he flipped his long hair in the air. Two sexy girls wearing nothing but bikinis and high heels rushing over to him with a trophy. That was the future he wanted, and sitting at Chuck E. Cheese wearing a yellow dress, a training bra and girls' Mary Jane shoes was about as far from that as he could get. I like bacon too, Mackenzie said, bumping her shoulder into the boy once more. Abby says it tastes like meat salt, whatever that means, but we could get 2 pizzas? The statement to Kennedy turned into more of a question as she looked at her aunt and then to Reagan. Bacon is fantastic, Reagan said, resting his chin on his hand as he leaned forward on the table. You know, Dee, you have good taste. Your sisters helped me pick out a tie for an important event tomorrow, but now I'm wondering if I didn't miss out by not waiting for you to be done trying on clothes. Seeing an opportunity, Rosemary reached over and knocked her knuckles on the table once in front of the damaged girl to get her attention. Seeing her lift her face up, she gave her what she hoped was a kind, reassuring smile, something Rosemary knew how to weaponize on men, but felt unsure of when talking with her nieces. In everyday life she was confident, something she learned to fake long ago, but with her family she always felt less sure. Afraid she was going to mess up and end up destroying something good she had. Faking confidence as she second-guessed herself was part of life, Mia had told her. I agree, you do have good taste. What car was that on the front of your new book? Ferrari 488 Pista. Kennedy was confident he was right, but you wouldn't know it by the tone of his voice. He just felt so small and lost he couldn't build up the nerve to even pretend to be confident. Life felt like a freefall, he didn't know which way was up. Here he was pretending to be a 10-year-old girl, a full 7 years younger than he was and the wrong gender. It was a nightmare, yet he had never received so much positivity from people in his life. Pista, huh? Reagan said to the shy girl. He had to fight down the urge to look over to the girl's aunt. All of this was for her and he wanted to see how she was reacting, but that could give away his intentions, so instead he clamped down on that feeling. You know, I got to test drive one of those once. A really fast car, a little too dangerous for someone like me. Hearing that the guy had driven the car caught Kennedy's attention. The car went for around $200,000 to $500,000. You drove one. They can get to over 60 miles per hour in about a minute. I want to go fast. Take me. Abigail said, happy to latch on to Dee Dee's interest if it meant she wasn't left out of the conversation. He doesn't have the car with him, Abby Bug, but my rental car goes pretty fast. Maybe you can have a turn in the front seat on the way home. Rosemary said, hoping to mollify the girl. The conversation went on for a little longer till the teenage waitress, who looked like she wasn't old enough to serve beer, came to take their order. She took note that Dee Dee pulled back into herself when the waitress came to the table, but for a few minutes she had come into her own as they discussed something she was passionate about, making her want to see if she could use that to help the girl come out of her shell. Thoughts of seeing if there was a car show that weekend or trying to find other things she might take interest in flooded her mind. It would all still have to be balanced with what Kenzie and Abby could or would want to do, but she was damned sure she was going to do her best to make Dee Dee feel like part of this family. With the food ordered, Rosemary clapped her hands together twice, something she picked up from one of her foster homes, one she had shared with her sister for a time. Their foster mother had always clapped her hands twice to get all 6 of the kids' attention that she watched over. Okay, food will be on the way shortly, but for now I think it is time for you girls to go have some fun on the games, she said, pulling out 3 rolls of tokens each containing $5 worth of coins. Handing one roll of coins to her eldest niece, she then put another down in front of Dee Dee, and then last she held up the final roll. Abby Bug, I'm going to break this up into 3, they are all for you, but you are going to get a third, and each of your sisters are going to get a third. But, the girl proclaimed before stopping when her aunt held up her hand. They are all yours, but I want you to go to your sisters when you run out of coins. I just want to make sure you don't lose any. That was only partially the truth. She was sure Abby would put them down and get distracted, but she also could just spend them all rapidly, and making her go ask for them from the others would slow her down, while at the same time showing that she was trusting the other 2 with responsibility. She was sure the move would make her sister proud, so long as it didn't start a fight. With money, or fake money in hand, Mackenzie, Kennedy and Abigail went off into the arcade area. The lights from the various games reflected off Kennedy's eyes as he looked out across the various games. It wasn't like he had never been to an arcade before. He had played plenty of games, just not often, and had never been given a full roll of money to go spend on them. He heard the bossy brat giving orders, but not really paying attention to her till she had spoken to him. Abby, make sure you stay inside of me or Aunt Rosie, but don't go and bother her. Come to me first, Mackenzie said, wanting to make sure the couple wouldn't be interrupted. Ken. Dee Dee, I'm going to go play skee ball, want to play with me? The happy smile on Mackenzie's face was clear to him. She had won a few points in his book by asking if they could get a second pizza so he could have bacon and pepperoni, but he also really wanted to go play the racing game he saw when they had walked in. You got to sit in a bucket seat, had gas and brake pedals, a steering wheel, and could shift gears. I was going to go. He pointed off to the side of one of the 3 machines set up for the race car arcade game. I get it. You go have fun. I just thought you would want a chance to beat me after you lost earlier, Mackenzie said, taunting the boy a bit in hopes he would join her. She would be fine by herself, but always found games more fun when it was a competition. I could totally beat you at skee ball or whatever. He had never actually played the game before, but it didn't look that hard, and the 13-year-old was way too arrogant for his tastes. You don't have to. I get it if you want to go play whatever. In fact, you should go have fun. I would feel bad if I beat you again. Nope, nope, nope. Kennedy shook his head. I will show you what it feels like to lose. Just try not to cry when I get more tickets than you. I won't cry, but I think the winner should get the loser's tickets. Deal, Kennedy said, holding out his hand, each pumping their arms a few times to seal the deal. neither paying much attention to the fact that Abby had stayed near them for just long enough for her to count her coins before dashing off to a machine that had lights spinning around, promising hundreds of tickets if the player pushed the button to stop the light at just the right time. While the three played, Rosemary found herself relaxing as she spoke to Reagan, enjoying his easy smile. She was apprehensive about this back at the mall and still felt it, but to a much lesser degree now that they were sitting here talking. Seeing how easy he interacted with the girls made her think she had a good idea of his character. It didn't mean she was going to drop the girls off and then go sleep with the man, but it did make her think about what it would be like to actually have a boyfriend, to be in a real relationship instead of just giving men the girlfriend experience. Rosemary figured that she was close to a year out of no longer having to do any escort work. Her business model for her new company was a sound enough investment that the bank had given her a loan, and she had leveraged that to get into more than a few conventions in Las Vegas. "So you have an important event tomorrow? What are you in town for?" she asked. Holding her gaze for just 2 heartbeats, he wanted her to feel listened to, but not stared at. He half rolled his shoulders in a shrug. "I will tell you, but try not to hold it against me. Some people change their minds about who I am, just because of what I do," he said, wishing she would hold herself against him. Giving him a lopsided smile, Rosemary raised one eyebrow, now much more curious. "I get that, I really do. Hearing what someone does for a living makes people make snap decisions and ignore things they already know about you." "Yes, exactly." Reagan nodded. "I'm here for a fundraiser, a few really. I'm what you would call I'm a politician." "Really? A city mayor maybe? Or something higher?" "Well, no. Honestly, I'm nothing yet. I have served on a few boards and councils in Florida, but nothing even as big as being a city vice mayor. I'm trying to change that, and things are just starting out. I'm trying to become a senator, believe it or not." "Huh," Rosemary said, leaning forward and resting her chin atop both her hands as she bridged them together. "I would love to hear more about that and your fundraisers." The two continued to talk, the gears in Rosemary's head shifting completely away from anything romantic as she pulled information out of him. She had been to 2 political fundraisers as the +1 to one of the guests and paid well for it, and the chance to get some of her girls, her models in political events could go a long way for her future. She imagined having a few of her models going around the room to have polite conversation, and then a few gathering together, making coy glances at a rich donor wanted to kiss up to. Rosemary had no doubt it would also lead to some of her girls going on paid dates, but that was the nature of the business. When the food came, Reagan forced himself to eat what they called pizza, and was able to get a slice and a half down before he had to call it quits. Excusing himself to use the restroom, he stopped off at the front counter to get some more tokens for the girls. He would rather be sitting in a cozy booth in the back of a bistro with Rose wearing something slinky and with a plunging neckline, but he wasn't a stranger to putting in the work to get what he wanted, and the way Rose had her beautiful green eyes locked on him, he was sure he would get just that. Coming back to the table, he put $15 worth of tokens down, the same his date had given the girls before dinner. It had kept them out of their hair, and it seemed like a good strategy for round 2. "I hope your beautiful aunt here doesn't mind, but I got you all a few more tokens. I can see by your pile of tickets, Mackenzie, that you are either really good, incredibly lucky, or you are out of tokens." Giving the man a big smile, Mackenzie glanced down at her pile of tickets. Most of them were from her own skill, but also a good portion of them were from Kennedy's lack of skill and bad luck. "You can call me Kenzie if you like." Oh, yeah. "I'm Abby. No one calls me Abigail, but you can't call me Abby Bug. Only Aunt Rosie calls me that, and Kennedy goes by Dee Dee today, but you were already calling her that." Holding in a chuckle, Rosemary smiled at the young girl, already clutching onto the roll of tokens that had been given to her instead of splitting them up like she had done. "I think I will do just that." Reagan said, making eye contact with the oldest of the trio of girls, giving preference to the one he was already talking to before shifting his attention to the youngest. She reminded him of his little sister Callie when they were younger. She wasn't nearly as talkative, but he remembered once before his parents got divorced. Callie, standing on the couch in their home, her face less than an inch from the side of his head and whispering, "Look at me," before yelling the same when he didn't do as she asked when he was just trying to ignore her to play a game with his friends. Abigail, Kennedy. His eyes shifted over to the slightly older blonde. Dee Dee, Abby. He looked back to the youngest. They are all pretty names, and I am happy to call you whatever you like. Tilting her head back, a tight smile grew on Abby's face before she stage whispered to Kennedy. He said we are pretty. That isn't what he... Mackenzie stopped herself from fully snapping back at her little sister, visually calming herself. Thank you, Reagan, for the tokens. We will leave the two of you alone now. As the girls departed, Rosemary leaned closer to the man. You do good with them. Would you consider quitting politics to become a professional babysitter? Stroking his beard under his lips, Reagan pretended to consider the question. Depends. Does it pay well? Well, not so much in money, but you get love, affection, and more than likely glitter. Tough sell. How about I get your phone number and we can discuss the offer later? With a large smile, Rosemary leaned back in her seat. Smooth. The two continued to talk while Kennedy made his way out to the arcade, happy to have another collection of coins after losing all $5 to the tricky brat that had suckered him into a bet. Skee ball shark? Card shark, but skee ball shark? He asked himself. Doesn't sound right. He answered his mental question out loud. What doesn't sound right? Mackenzie asked. Looking to his side, he didn't bother to turn his head. Nothing, I'm going to go to that game there, you go do whatever. Smirking, Mackenzie stepped in front of the smaller boy. Don't want to try your luck again? I am not falling for any of that, just leave me alone, Kennedy said, pushing past the taller girl and trying not to think about the fact she was 5 inches taller than him. Getting away from her, he sat down in one of the 3 seats for the racing car game. With how fun it looked, he was surprised no one was using them, but was glad to not have another brat talking to him while he played. Putting his coins on top of the fake steering console, he slipped a few coins into the slots and smiled brightly as it came to life. He got to choose all sorts of things, what car he got, the driver, even from a selection of wheels. While the car and driver had different statistics, it looked like to him the wheels were just cosmetic. Soon he was seeing his car near the starting line, a few back from the front, numbers going down on the screen as it went through the countdown for the race to start, and then he was off. The seat had to be adjusted for his height, and after the first match Kennedy had gotten it just right, one foot on the gas and the other on the brake, he was ready to go for round 2. Sliding a few more coins in, he reselected the same car, but chose a different driver this time, selecting Danica Patrick. With everything that had happened to him today, he had been reluctant to choose one of the 2 female race car drivers from the list, but the car he had chosen had a slower start time to counter its top speed and weight. Every driver had an ability. The first person he picked increased the top speed, but with all the turns on the track he didn't think it was helping much, and Danica's ability was a faster start, so he hoped that would be a good balance for his car. For the next half hour Kennedy sat in the plastic bucket seat, the built-in speakers projecting the game's sound effects and music overhead as he played, only having to put in coins once more to continue after getting 5th place on one of the tracks. Taking 3 coins in hand, Kennedy went to put them in to continue for another set of courses when he heard a voice near him. Hey, racing isn't for little girls. Turning his head to look at who was talking, Kennedy had to crane his neck from his seated position to look up at a teen boy who looked like he was almost 6 feet tall. I'm not. He started to say he wasn't a little girl, but was cut off before he could even admit to his current predicament. Look, I don't care, just get out of my seat so I can play. Narrowing his eyes, Kennedy did his best to glare up at the teen. His height made him look like he was an adult, but his voice said he was still going through puberty. Sit in one of the other seats. I'm not telling you how to jump rope or play hopscotch, so don't try telling me what to do. Now move out of my seat. The overgrown 14-year-old boy said with all the confidence in the world. There are other seats, I'm all ready. Kennedy began to say, but as he was talked over once more it was clear the giant was not listening. Move or I will make you move, and then I will get my sister who is the manager here to kick you out. Go play in the ball bin or something. Clenching his jaw, Kennedy considered what he would say next, but the kid was huge and the make you move threat wasn't one he wanted to see carried out. He had more than enough of that. Stay quiet, keep your head down. That is how you stay safe, he told himself, standing up from the seat to move out of the way. While he was going to do what the giant wanted, Kennedy did consider pulling his pants down and running, or even going to get a cup full of cold water to throw at him, but before any of that could happen he found himself flying through the air. I said move, the hormonal teen said, reaching down to the side of the chair to pull it all the way back and pushing the girl out of the way. Ow! Kennedy cried out as he fell on the ground, his side hitting one of the other hard plastic chairs. Go be a baby somewhere else, the boy said, sneering at the brat who just wouldn't go away. He came in here almost every day. His sister was working for some free food and to play video games, and the pipsqueak just wasn't smart enough to understand that this was his seat. The commotion was more than enough to draw the eyes of those nearby. One 16-year-old worker just kept walking by, having more than enough of kids, and pretended he didn't see anything. For Mackenzie, though, when she saw the taller boy shove Kennedy to the floor, she saw red. Intellectually she knew Kennedy was a boy, and an older one at that, but she couldn't help seeing a young girl being bullied by an older boy that had no problem physically attacking her. Hey! I said HEY, she yelled out. Soon as the teen that had a good 5 inches on her turned to her, hands on his hips, she asked before he could even finish what he was saying to her. Yeah, what do you want? That was when she kicked him as hard as she could between the legs. Leave her alone! Mackenzie yelled out. Unknown to Mackenzie, her little sister had seen it all from the beginning. She had started to run off to tell her aunt, but when she saw Dee Dee get pushed down, she balled her hands into fists and charged the much taller boy. Leaping in the air, she jumped and latched onto his back, wrapping one arm around his neck and yanking on his hair with the other. As his head snapped to the side, hitting her own face, she chomped down on his ear. She had gotten in a fair bit of trouble for biting when she was angry, but thoughts of how she got grounded for this very activity before hadn't even crossed her mind as she chomped down at the same time as her older sister kicked him squarely between the legs. With his eyes bugging out, the tall teen opened his mouth to scream, but only a weak groan escaped his lips as he fell to his knees. He felt whoever got on his back continued their assault as small hands pounded into his shoulders and back, along with his hair being yanked on by the roots. Holding himself between the legs, he closed his eyes and fell to his side. Whoever it was on top of him kicked and thrashed as they were removed. Sniffling, Kennedy got up to his feet, amazed at what he had just witnessed. Kenzie kicked the boy so hard in the nuts that he wasn't sure the kid would ever be able to have kids, and Abby, the girl, had leapt at him like some rabid monkey from a nature documentary. He had been beat up plenty of times, one of the reasons he had no problem stealing from the houses he was put in. The other kids and sometimes the adults physically lashed out or punished him for so much as playing with something that wasn't his. What had never happened before was people defending him, let alone beating the crap out of someone that had hit him. He could only stand there in awe of them, even as a dark-haired girl that had the words manager on her name tag. What is going on here? Get off of him, you little... The restaurant's shift manager said as she pulled on the girl in the pink skirt to get her to stop attacking her little brother. Tyler, are you okay? What did they do to you? Do to him? Mackenzie said in an indignant tone with her fists on her hips. This bully hit my sister. she said, pointing to Kennedy, who still had a few tears in his eyes that he didn't let flow. Hold on, hold on, Rosemary said, rushing up to the scene with Reagan nearby. What is going on here? She felt like panic was going to take over her body. She hadn't seen what happened, not till the end when the boy had fallen down and Abby pounded her fists into him. Are these little monsters yours? Sarah, the manager, said, waving her hand at the three girls. Monsters? Rosemary asked, feeling offended enough to question her. Yeah, they attacked my little brother and now I'm calling the police. Hearing the word cops made Reagan step forward. The last thing he needed was to have his name on some police report because the person he was trying to pick up had violent nieces. I'm truly sorry for what happened. How about I pay for our meal? He said, pulling out his wallet. Leave a generous tip for our waitress, generous enough to help everyone here to just walk away. The police always complicate things. Is it worth all that for what, $20 an hour? Looking down at her brother, Sarah clenched one hand into a fist before relaxing it. She was seeing red, and more so at the fact that the man was right. She wasn't being paid enough for all this BS, and she didn't need her boss knowing that her little brother was here again without adult supervision. 13. Pardon? Reagan said, keeping his attention the girl who couldn't be more than a few days over 20 while his red-headed date was checking on her family. I only make $13.50 an hour. That made Reagan stop to think for a second. That figure sounded made up. Sure, kids made minimum wage at fast food and this place didn't even serve food that good, but the girl was a shift manager. That sounds incredibly unfair. Someone like you, in a position that you have, you deserve much more. How about for today we bump that up? He said, pulling a $100 bill from his wallet, folding it over once before holding it out between two fingers. Reagan's eyes flicked down to the girl's name tag. Sarah, you deserve more than this place, and at least today. He gave her a smile. You are going to earn what you deserve this. He said, repeating the word to help the girl feel both empowered and underappreciated. With the manager plied with money and compliments, the group was able to exit without a call to the police or even being asked to not come again. Hearing what had actually happened made Rosemary want to punch the boy that attacked Dee Dee in the nose, but that wouldn't be right, at least not after what Kenzie had done to him. The 14-year-old had to be in like the 98th percentile in height for his age, but none of that mattered after the swift kick. The kid had still been on the ground holding a bag of ice between their legs when the group had departed. Well, Rosemary said, waving her hand up at the sign of the rat mascot. That was an adventure. Your mileage may vary. It was that. You get your girls home. I had fun, really. He lied. I will give you a call later tonight. Maybe after their mother gets them to bed we could get some coffee. Tonight isn't good for me, she replied, thinking about the fallout when her sister found out about the battle at Chuck E. Cheese. Tomorrow then, Reagan said, lying again. Rose was pretty, but things showing up in the papers as part of a domestic disturbance and battery call would scare the donors off. While the two said their goodbyes, Kennedy just kept looking between the two girls. One 13, the other 8, almost 9, and they had not hesitated for a second to come help him when a giant had shoved him. He wouldn't do that for anyone, no one would, and yet that is exactly what they did. Neither of them said how he owed them one, just asking him if he was okay. Kennedy was truly not sure how to process what had just happened. Scene 17. Getting home, Mia took in a long breath as she closed the door, smelling the familiar comforting scent of her home. Closing her eyes, Mia let out the breath in a drawn-out contented sigh, happy to be home after having to rush to the office, when she should have been enjoying the day with her family. She was about to pull off her shoes when movement at the top of the stairs caught her attention. She didn't get a good look, but she was pretty sure she just saw Kennedy running off to his room wearing a yellow and black nightgown. Kennedy? She called out his name to clear up the confusion. "Hey, look who is home," Rosemary said, coming into the entranceway from the living room. "I was afraid your boss was going to make you sleep at the office. It was bad enough she called you into work on your day off," she said, giving her older sister a bit of SAS. "Haha," Mia said with a mock laugh. "Really though, while it was a surprise you came into town, I really do appreciate you helping me out. I know Jolene appreciates you taking the girls off her hands as well. Though." Mia turned away from her sister, looking back up the stairs as she heard her youngest giggling and the sound coming from the wrong side of the upstairs hallway. "Speaking of them, did I just see Kennedy in a nightgown? I know earlier Abby had to lend some clothes, but..." "Yeah, it was a yellow and black bumblebee thing. Kenzie picked it out. She wasn't much help at first, but she came around," Rosemary said, thinking back to the shopping trip earlier that evening. "Okay, so you got the girls some clothes too, but why is Kennedy wearing that nightgown?" Nodding her head, Rosemary gave her sister a bit of a shrug. She hadn't expected to spend this much on the trip, but there was no way she couldn't include Mackenzie and Abigail in on the shopping trip. "You would have to ask Dee Dee and Abby. I think Abby Bug was the driving force behind what her new sister wore to bed." Cocking her head to the side, Mia blinked a few times in confusion. "Dee Dee? New sister?" She had an incredibly long day, felt both physically and mentally exhausted to the point that if Rosie told her the sky was purple and had always been purple, she would have to double-check before calling her out. Yeah, on the way to go shopping, the girls were talking about nicknames, how Mackenzie already had Ken in her name and they settled on Dee Dee. I think Kiki was a close contender. Cute, right? It was hard for Mia to accept that the boy with wild unwashed hair and a little more than rough around the edges would want to be called something so feminine when he had asked her to call him Ken. "I think I need a glass of wine," she said, now thinking the nickname and sister talk might all be stemming from the same place, the teen boy having to borrow clothes from her daughter. Her two probably thought it was all in good fun, not thinking that it was actually bullying. Rosie, though, she had no excuse to join in on that and should know what undermining a boy's masculinity could do to their self-esteem. She just didn't have the energy to scold her, not when she needed to ask for another favor. "I got you," Rosemary said, quickly moving her bare feet across the room to the end table next to the couch, before producing a now empty wine glass that looked like it had already been used in a half-empty bottle of her 5-year-old Cabernet Sauvignon. "It has been a day, my nieces can be." With a half-smile on her face, she stumbled for a word. "Spitfires." This time when Mia laughed, it was genuine. Each of her girls had been called worse. They were good kids, and she thought they were good kids, much better than she had been once upon a time, but they were still kids and knew exactly how to push other people's buttons, doubly so for one another. "I will ignore the fact you helped yourself to my wine fridge if you join me for a glass before I have to go up and talk to them about bullying Kennedy or Dee Dee, or whatever." She said the last word with another sigh, this one full of frustration, thinking about how she had to go play the bad guy after abandoning them for work. "Bullying?" Rosemary scoffed. "Tonight those three saw a bully, but I wouldn't call what happened on their part bullying. When that bigger boy pushed Dee Dee down, both Mackenzie and Abigail jumped to protect their new sibling. Honestly, I couldn't be prouder. Right now the three are in Dee Dee's room reading a book we got. One Mackenzie picked out for Dee Dee after learning about their love of cars. She added to make sure Mia got at least an inkling of an idea of how nice and welcoming her girls had been. Huh. Mia had already taken the wine bottle out of her sister's hand, but hearing a bit about their day, she turned her head to look at the stairs once more. "You know, I think it would be best if I go tuck them in before I have any wine," she said while looking away. Things between the three had been mostly good, rocky at times, and calling Kennedy their sister would definitely need to be addressed, but hearing that they stood together and were actively thinking of Kennedy and something he would like did make her feel proud. Turning back to her red-headed sibling, she handed the bottle of wine back. Rain, check on the drink. Will you be around tomorrow? I have another day of work ahead of me, and I know the girls would love spending time with you rather than hanging out at my work stuck with Jolene. Not that there's anything wrong with her, just, you're their aunt. Mia shrugged her shoulders in an uncaring manner. I guess you are likable to some impressionable people. Taking the bottle from her sister's hand, Rosemary raised an eyebrow. I make a living off people liking me. Soon as she said it, Rosemary knew it was a mistake. The pleasant expression on his sister's face fell away. Sorry, I know. With a shake of her head, Mia took the first 2 steps up the stairs, before stopping to look at her sister, who looked ashamed. Rosie, I love you, and while I don't approve of what you do, I understand you have had a very different life than me. I hope your new business venture works, but even if it doesn't, you are always welcome here, so long as what you do doesn't come here with you. With a dim smile, Rosemary nodded. After spending what she had today, she did plan on taking on a client, but that wasn't going to come close to touching the girls. But the very fact she had made the plans when promising herself that this trip was just to visit made her feel ashamed. I can watch the girls tomorrow. You get done whatever it is you need to, and then maybe we can all have a big family dinner? That sounds great. Just order something. No one wants to eat a turkey that is both frozen and somehow burnt. Mia said, teasing her sister before resuming walking up the stairs. That was one time. Rosemary yelled up after her. Ignoring the freckled woman, Mia moved to the right at the top of the stairs, double-checking that her youngest was in fact not in her room before heading back the other way. Inside the old playroom, Kennedy's room had the door open, and inside she found the 3 kids all together on the bed. Kennedy sat in the middle, a book with the picture of a sports car on the cover open in his lap, and each of her 2 girls on either side of him. Her tired eyes saw that he was in fact wearing a bumblebee-themed girl's nightgown that Rosemary had bought from Mackenzie. Well, don't the 3 of you look cozy? Mind if I join too? Yeah, Abby said, patting the sliver of bed left open beside her. Ack! She then proclaimed as her mother picked her up in order to sit down with her youngest in her lap. Better? Mia said, peering over Abby's shoulders as she hugged the girl from behind. Getting a head nod for confirmation, Mia raised one of her thinly arched eyebrows as she looked at the teen boy, who looked like he wanted the room to swallow him so that he could avoid her gaze. Nice nightie you got there. Did the girls make you put it on? Soon as she asked the question, she felt Abby start to squirm about like a squid caught in a trap. No. I didn't make her do nothing, Abby said, feeling her mother hug her tighter before whispering in her ear. I did not make him do anything. Is how you say that, sweetheart? Mia whispered, correcting her daughter. See, Mackenzie said, whispering to Kennedy from his other side, before speaking up. Kennedy has been pretending to be our middle sister all day. He even told Aunt Rosie that he is a 10-year-old girl. Is that true? Have you been playing pretend today? Mia had almost accused him of lying. It even took her effort to keep her voice neutral. Kennedy by all accounts has had a difficult life, and while she thought that she had earned his trust, with his experiences and accusation that showed she didn't trust him could set them back. Kennedy said, hesitating. He had in fact said that to the girl's aunt, but she didn't believe that he was really a boy, let alone a teenager, and things just kind of got worse from there. And it wasn't really his fault he was wearing a dress. That was the pirate guy and his wife that worked in Miss Mia's office, and that was after the 2 girls conspired together at the park, and his mind rambled on and on, each thought joining the last in a run-on sentence about how each step along the way wasn't his fault. He was just so tired. He hadn't even fought the girls over putting on the girl's nightgown. It wasn't like he had anything really to change into. Sure, a bunch of clothes were bought for him, seeing a closet partially full and drawers completely full of underwear, sure they were panties, but he never had a full drawer of one article of clothing in his entire life. Well, he figured he might have, but he really didn't remember little details like that when his parents were still around. She didn't lie, well she did before, but now Dee Dee is telling the truth. Abby said, squirming around in her mother's lap so that she could look her in the eye. Honey, Mia said in a soft, easy voice. You do know Kennedy is a boy, not a girl, right? No, she isn't a boy, look at her. And she isn't 19, she is shorter than me. The young strawberry blonde-haired girl said with more than a few shakes of her head. He is too. Well, he is 17, Abby, not 19 or 10 years old. Mackenzie said, leaning forward on the bed to correct her younger sister. Stop! Kennedy yelled, feeling like he wanted to just dive under the bed after raising his voice and having everyone's eyes on him. Being the center of attention had been the antithesis of his life up to this point, but he couldn't stand there being a debate on his gender and his actual age just because he was short. That wasn't his fault, none of this was. With the three people in the room looking at him, especially the beautiful Miss Mia, Kennedy started to feel his face grow red and tears come to his eyes. The thought of nothing being his fault dredged up his darkest thoughts, the car crash that took his parents. He could remember his mother's smile, he could remember his father towering over the world as he tossed him about back in those formative years, and he remembered his parents fighting about something in the car, not what exactly, but it had been something about him, something he had done. He couldn't remember what, but he did remember the car crash, or at least part of it. He had done that, it was because of him, because of something he did. The only people in the world that loved him died. When Miss Aunt Rosie said she cared about him, when Kenzie and Abby stood up for him he felt baffled and he felt like he was loved, much like he did with Miss Mia held him, and he was afraid it would all vanish. He hadn't done anything wrong, not really, not recently, but he thought it could all be punishment for what he had once done. I'm a boy, but. He tried talking through the wave of emotions coming over him, but he didn't get far. He knew better than this, acting like a kid and crying only got him something to cry about, but he couldn't stop himself and he was wedged in the bed between multiple people. Escape wasn't much of an option. Instead of a slap or being yanked about like he was used to, Kennedy felt a warm embrace. Not just from the woman that said she wanted to adopt him, to be his mother, but from her own kids too. To Mia, it looked like Kennedy was about to have a panic attack. He was starting to blubber and take in ragged breaths. She immediately took him into her arms, pulling him to her and in the process adding her little girl who was in her lap into the embrace. Shoo, shhh, shhh. It is okay, everything will be okay, she said, giving each of her daughters a weak smile. Mia was aware bringing in a foster child would have its challenges, she just never expected those challenges to rend her heart so much. The four had been holding the feminized teen for less than a minute when a now tipsy Rosemary came dashing into the room, almost colliding with the door frame. She had heard a bit of yelling from upstairs, and then she was positive she heard someone let out a crying wail. Seeing everyone holding their newest family member, she came to the edge of the bed worried. Is everything okay? Dee Dee, are you okay, honey? Kennedy, his name is Kennedy, Mia said, correcting her sister, a bit of anger inside of her bubbling up in her tone. The boy was crying after trying to say that he was a boy, the damage of the day coming to the surface. Slightly opening both eyes, Kennedy took in a ragged breath as his lip quivered, trying to fight off the next wave of tears. He could see the concern on everyone's face, nowhere was there a look of hatred or disdain that he was so used to seeing when people looked at him. Hearing Mia use his full name instead of the girly nickname made his heart beat a little faster. Aunt Rosie. Rosemary didn't know the truth, she had been so nice to him, thrilled even to help him, she had bought him so much. He didn't want girls' clothes, but she never snapped at him at how expensive things were, or how much he was costing her. She did it all and seemed happy to do it. He couldn't let that fall away. She would hate him. What he felt earlier would fade away, and then Miss Mia would hate him, and then, he would be sent away. Again. Everyone can call me Dee Dee, he said, finally able to hold in his emotions. It didn't happen often, but every few years his emotions broke like a dam, and even now, while he felt like he had a grip on it all, it was a tenuous thing. Are you sure? Mia asked, looking from the boy in her arms with tears running down his face to her sister, who unbeknownst to her hadn't picked up on the use of the male pronouns when correcting her on his name in her inebriated state. Yes. He added emphasis to his words before clamping his mouth shut as he felt his emotions rise once more. It's okay, Mackenzie said, repeating her mother's words as she rubbed her hand across his back to try and comfort him. She was feeling terrible till Kennedy said he actually wanted to be called Dee Dee. She had only pushed harder on the nickname when he refused to tell the truth. Now she was just left feeling more confused than anything. Hey, how about this? Mia said, pulling the sniffling boy away from her chest to look him in his blue tear-filled eyes. How about I get the brush? You like it when I brush your hair, right? She had never had a boy before and didn't think it was an activity boys would really sit through, but she did it for her girls, and after she had tamed the tangle that was his hair, he had seemed so relaxed every time after when she ran the brush through his hair. Unable to say a word, Kennedy nodded his head, but not wanting her to go, he pressed his face back into her chest, his arms wrapping around her once more. He felt the shifting of the bed and the soothing hand on his back vanish as Mackenzie ran off to get her mother's brush. Soon Mia was closing the door to the bedroom, the lights off after Kennedy passed out and dead to the world after the fourth stroke of his thick bristled brush through his hair. Feeling the door close, she rested her forehead on the wood, her hands still on the handle. When she had gotten home, she was physically and mentally exhausted, and now she could add emotionally to it. It had all passed. Kennedy was obviously wounded. She was going to make sure he got all the love and attention he deserved, but it also made it clear that he was going to need some professional help. You okay? Rosemary asked in a half-whisper. The door across the hall from Kennedy's was now closed, with Abigail joining her big sister in her room, so the girls' aunt had a bed to stay in. No one was willing to accept her getting a hotel room or staying on the couch. Yeah, Mia said with a hard sigh. This is what I signed up for, and I'm happy to be there, but all this girl stuff and saying it is okay to use the nickname Dee Dee. She shook her head, positive once she closed her eyes, pillow under her head or not, she would be gone. Rosemary could see how tired her sister was, but it felt like there was more to it than being overworked. A house full of girls can be a lot, and I don't think there is anything wrong with the name Dee Dee. I think it is cute. And if you want a man in your life, all you have to do is look. Sis, you are successful, brilliant, or at least passably brilliant and downright pretty, she said with a big smile on her face. Passably, like I can pass as brilliant? And just pretty? Mia said with a hand on her hip and an eyebrow raised. When she saw her sometimes brat of a sister just give a nonchalant shrug, she rolled her eyes. I already had my man, my love. I miss him, but I'm happy with what I have. Blowing out some air from her lungs, Rosemary rolled her head. Yeah. I guess being happy is the point. Maybe get your happy ass to bed then, and after some beauty sleep I can use a better word than pretty. Turning her head, Mia looked to Kennedy's door and then to Mackenzie's, where her two other children slept or were about to. Yeah, I'm beat, she said, before taking a few steps down the hallway to the master bedroom, stopping and looking over her shoulder when she felt her sister tap her on the shoulder. Hey, you are doing good. You are doing a wonderful job raising your girls. Really, I could never be the Wonder Woman you are. I think you should hear that from time to time. I love you, sis. Giving her younger sister a tired smile, Mia nodded. I love you too, but I think if I can be a superhero, I would like to be one of those green ring people that can make whatever they want. You mean a Green Lantern? Rosemary asked. With the tired smile still on her face, Mia gave a partial nod. Sure, them too. Dork. Name calling? Very mature. Rosemary giggled as her older sibling waved her off as she made her way to her bedroom. Scene 18. When morning came, Kennedy pulled himself out of bed, his bladder full and the front of the yellow and black bumblebee nightie tinted from his morning wood. Pressing one hand to hide his unintentional excitement, he dashed out of his bedroom into the shared bathroom, looking much like a child holding themselves so they didn't pee as he tried to hide his morning erection from anyone else in the household. Pulling up the girly pajamas with one and biting down on the fabric with his mouth so he could use both hands to do his morning business, he let out a sigh of relief as his bladder relaxed. The sight of his member coming out from the yellow and white cotton panties that he had slightly pulled down wasn't a comfortable sight, even if the underwear itself was much softer on his skin than his normal underwear. Even when his jockey underwear were new, what he wore now was a far cry softer, let alone from the threadbare ones he had left when he first came to the Adams home. Finishing his business and washing his hands and face, Kennedy exited the bathroom and took a look in the older of the two girls' bedrooms that was across from his own. He saw no sign of Kenzie or Abby, and the bed was made all nice and trim. A sign. Kenzie made her own bed, despite Abby sleeping in there with her. A rule for the house was all beds had to be made before you left to come downstairs, and while his smaller foster sister did as she was told, the girl wasn't exactly tidy in anything she did. With them downstairs, he crept closer to the master bedroom, hoping to have some alone time with Miss Mia. As he got halfway down the hallway where the walls opened up for the stairs, he was able to hear Abby singing aloud to a kids' show he had seen her watch more than once. Winks, if your hand is Holland mine. We can fly through space and time. And together we'll be sure. The young girl's voice projected enough that Kennedy could easily hear her singing along to the show happily, though a bit off-key. Dismissing Abby from his thoughts, he took a few more steps before he was standing in the doorway to the master bedroom. Behind him was the younger girl's room, the bed left unmade, the girl's pretty aunt not seemingly caring about the house rule, while in front of him was where Miss Mia slept. The room was half again as large as the others. The king-size bed had been made with extra colorful pillows left on top of the quilt. Slowly Kennedy leaned into the room, mostly just sticking his head in to peer around inside, hoping to find the older attractive woman so he could try and explain things to her. No one had told him he wasn't allowed in her bedroom, but he had been in more than one place where going into the master bedroom without permission ended only in one way, so he wasn't going to risk it. So with a huff, he turned around and went back to his room. The room was mostly the same from his first day here, though it looked more lived in. The same poster board hung above his bed. He was positive some of the glitter had fallen off onto him. It seemed like an everyday occurrence that he found a speck of it in his hair, on a shoulder or forearm, and no matter how many times he took it down and threw it away, it would somehow find its way back above his bed. The last time it found its way back from the trash, it had been hung higher than he could reach, and imagined Kenzie had asked her mom to help hand it this last time, the poster board now having two of its tacks stuck in at the ceiling and the bottom two on the wall so that it hung at an angle. The sheets on the bed were now a white set. They felt so much nicer than anything he had before. The purplish-pink blanket wasn't to his liking, nor the pillowcases, but under them were thick fluffy pillows that weren't flat or had the yellow stains from long use like he was used to. The bed was the perfect example of his life right now. It was leaps and bounds better than anything he had before. Yet it looked as though it was meant for a girl. His closet and drawers, while not full, had more clothing than he could remember having, but they weren't clothes for a 17-year-old boy. On the floor next to his door was a stuffed cat face pillow and a pair of dolls from one of Abby's cartoons with over-the-top makeup and dresses. Those had no business being in his room, but this room used to be the designated play room, and he kept finding Abby back in here asking him if he wanted to play with her too, and when he told her no, she just stayed. Really the only things in the room that were him, just purely him, was his portable CD player sitting on his nightstand next to the book he had gotten the day before. Everything in the room was his though. He owned dresses, headbands. Going over everything in his mind, he stopped and glared at the dolls left near his door, making sure to mentally correct himself that those were not his, no matter what the 9/10 of the law said about possession. Looking down at himself, already knowing what he was wearing, Kennedy pulled the garment over his head, about to toss it on the floor before moving it to the laundry basket. He was sure he didn't want Miss Mia seeing him wearing that and went about trying to find the most masculine thing he now owned in order to cover his, really his this time, panties. Not long after Kennedy made his way down the stairs, wearing a pair of jean shorts that were much shorter than he would have liked, coming to a cuffed end halfway down his thigh, and if it wasn't clear they were not for boys, the bedazzled trim around the shallow pockets would have made it clear. Not that his choice of shirts was much better. The day before, when he had changed from one thing to the next, he didn't remember the one he was currently wearing, but it was the closest thing to a normal t-shirt. The sleeves were just a little shorter than a normal t-shirt, and on the back it had a large butterfly decal that made it look like he had purple butterfly wings with black spots. Getting to the bottom of the stairs and looking over at Abby, who was laying on her stomach, propped up by a pillow as she looked hypnotized by whatever kiddie show was on, the only sign she was really there was how she slowly kicked her legs in the air. He figured Miss Mia had to be in the kitchen, and from the bottom of the stairs, the house's entryway, you had two options. One was to go into the living room where Abby was, and he didn't want to get her attention. The other was to go into the dining room and then to the kitchen, but that way he would run into Kenzie, who was already looking at him as she spooned sugary cereal to her mouth, and her pretty red-headed aunt, who was looking at her phone. Briefly he considered his path, knowing either way he would have to deal with one of the brats. Thinking about them like that bubbled memories from the day before to the surface of his mind. Kenzie giving him the book, her and Abby attacking the bully, causing his opinion of them to soften once more, at least for a second, before he remembered Abby throwing away his shoes, and Kenzie making him swap shoes with her. Making his decision, he moved into the dining room, hoping the older of the two brats would keep her trap shut with her aunt nearby. As life had taught him long ago though, he was not lucky. Good choice. Mackenzie said she had seen him coming down the stairs and pausing before coming into the room. Seeing him wear one of her old shirts that she had grown out of brought a small smile to her face. Her mom had made her get her old things that she had grown out of or just didn't want anymore and give them to her little sister, but Abby, being Abby, the little diva that she was, had only taken a few things. The rest were going to be donated, but with her mother's schedule and the bag ending up stuffed in her closet, they had been left forgotten till last night when she brought them in Kennedy's room, when she offered to help put away his new batch of clothing. Rosemary made the sound as she looked up from her phone, where she was reading a few political news articles. Oh. Good morning, Dee Dee. She saw the young girl give her a small wave of her hand, chalking the nonverbal greeting up to still being sleepy after she was allowed to sleep in. Seeing the girl wearing the shorts she had bought her, made the corner of one side of her lips to curl up in a half smile. Knowing she hadn't bought the shirt, she loved the idea of Dee Dee pairing something new with something old that she liked. Hey. Ah. Kennedy let his words trail off as he peered around once more for the wonder of the house. She wasn't upstairs, not in the dining room, the living room or the kitchen, that only left the laundry room, the basement or the backyard. Do you know where Miss Mia is? He asked, turning back around to face the two redheads. Mom went to work, but promised she would be home for dinner and that we could go out for. Mackenzie's voice cut off as she looked around the room to make sure her little sister wasn't around and she hadn't seen, before continuing in a whisper. Ice cream. Narrowing his eyes at her, Kennedy repeated what she had said, not sure why she was acting all odd. Ice cream? Thinking of the frozen treat, he couldn't help himself as he licked his button lip, thinking about some chocolate ice cream or some rocky road with its nuts and marshmallow mixed into the chocolate. Ice cream! Everyone heard as Abby ran into the room in such a rush that she hit her shoulder on the wall as she rushed in. Eyes almost bugging out, Rosemary took in a deep breath at the sudden burst of sound from her youngest niece. She was holding on to that card for later when she would inevitably become a handful while she watched them for the day. Yes, Abby Bug, and yes, Dee Dee. After dinner tonight, so long as all three of you are good, we will go out for ice cream. Nodding her head in tight short rapid nods, the young girl pumped her fists, already imagining a triple scoop waffle cone. When can we go? Giving the girl a flat look, Kennedy was the first, but not only to respond to her. She said tonight, after dinner. Not just having ice cream, but going out for it was an experience he had never had. Buying those buckets or bricks of ice cream at the grocery store, or even getting one of those dollar ice cream sandwiches from the ice cream truck he knew. He didn't consider himself a fool. He had seen commercials for places like Baskin-Robbins. He had never stepped foot in a store completely dedicated to ice cream and couldn't help feeling a bit giddy about the idea. Only if you're good, Mackenzie said with a tight shake of her head as she looked at her little sister. Acting like the phrase was both a threat and a ward to keep her chaos at bay. Looking between the three girls, she could see the two blonde girls were excited at the idea, one more so than the other, and wished she still got that excited over small things like that. Well, I think your mother meant it more if we are all good. She made a circular motion with her finger to indicate all of them in the room. I don't think it is fair to punish you three if I act up, but she is the one in charge. So. She met her foster niece's gaze, peering into her bright blue eyes. I'm going to be counting on you, Dee Dee, to help keep me in line, and of course, Kenzie, I will need your help with Abby. What about me? Abby said, climbing onto one of the chairs at the dinner table, coming to sit on her knees. It was Mackenzie's turn to give the girl a flat look as she crossed her arms. Nothing, you just have to behave. She then felt her aunt's hand gently touch her arm just below the shoulder. Everyone can help each other, Abby Bug, you can help Dee Dee stay out of trouble. She nodded her head to the soon-to-be adopted child, so she knew who she was really directing the next comment to. We all can feel useful because we are useful, from 8-year-olds that think they are 9, to withered old bats like me. Family looks out for one another. Withered, old? Kennedy asked himself, looking at the green-eyed beauty sitting at the table. Today she was wearing a pair of tight high-waisted jeans that she had her purple blouse tucked into. It had thin vertical ridges across it, lace at the ends of the sleeves and the neckline, the entire thing looking like it was wrapped around her in order to put it on. Today she had even done her hair differently, having a tight braid on the side of her head that exposed one of her ears that was double pierced, allowing him to see a 2-piece pearl earring. Not the same, but similar to what she had gotten them the other day, and up higher on her ear was a black earring that was more of a clasp. He felt a light blush come to his cheeks as his eyes lingered on her red, soft, inviting lips and then down to the cleavage he could see. You're not, you're gorgeous. Aw. Dee Dee, that was super sweet of you to say. Come here and give your gorgeous aunt a hug. Rosemary said, more than happy to get a compliment she was fishing for after Mia had failed to return the compliment she gave her before she ran off to work. Giving the 10-year-old girl a hug, she gave a little extra squeeze, noticing she wasn't wearing a camisole or her training bra. Honey, I know it is new, but you have to get in the habit of putting on your bra. Looking to the eldest of the three, Rosemary motioned for her to help Dee Dee. Kenzie, be a dear and help your sister and be nice, change can be scary. Just when Kennedy was about to voice his opinion about not needing a bra, training or otherwise, there was a light, timid knock to the door, followed by the doorbell ringing. Mackenzie was about to move to the door when Rosemary held out her hand. I got this, the two of you scamper off. Not wanting to wear a bra, but less willing to let yet another person see him wearing girl clothes, Kennedy started to follow Mackenzie up the stairs, only turning around to look at who was at the door halfway up. He saw a plump Asian woman with thick black glasses, a hairstyle that had bangs covering her entire forehead, and wearing a frumpy skirt suit. Not knowing who it was and not wanting her to see him, he continued back up to his room, now unable to see or hear who it was. "Good morning, how can I help you? Selling something? Is it good? Please tell me you aren't here to tell me about your Lord and Savior." Rosemary held the door open partway, enough for her to stand in the opening, but not enough for whoever it was to see past her into the house. "Yes, no, nothing like that," the Asian woman said to the series of questions, not fully picking up on the playful nature behind them. Jessica Chow. "Nice to meet you, Jess. What can I do for you on this lovely Saturday morning?" Rosemary asked, not bothering to provide her own name to the stranger. Yes, well, I'm here to check in on Jessica looked down at her table, flicking the power buttons and typing in her PIN to read the file she had open. "Kennedy Towns," she said with a small smile as she looked up from reading her tablet. "And you are?" Rosemary said as she stepped outside the house, closing the door behind her at the mention of Dee Dee's name. "I'm Jessica Chow." She blinked twice before her smile grew slightly. Yes, I'm here from Child Protective Services. I'm his new caseworker. Just got Kennedy put on my to-do list yesterday after I left for the day, and apparently his last caseworker should have already seen him this week, so here I am. This is all routine, I just need to speak with him to make sure everything is okay. Okay, mostly routine, we don't tend to come on weekends, but knew my best. Your best, Rosemary said in a flat tone. Kennedy Towns, you said he right? As in Kennedy is a boy? Already knowing the answer, Jessica still looked down at her tablet and nodded her head as she answered. Yes. Okay, I think you might have some wrong information. What else does your file say? The redhead woman asked, getting a little closer. Well, may I ask, are you his foster mother? Mia Adams? She asked, realizing she hadn't gotten the woman's name and didn't want to assume just because she had the right address she wasn't talking to the wrong person. Rosemary pointed to herself. Kennedy's new aunt, and I think she would have a small problem with you misgendering her. Blinking a few more times, Jessica looked back to her tablet and once again confirmed that her charge was in fact a male. Yes, Kennedy is a boy, why do you ask? Did you say she? This is... Jessica started to rattle off the home address even as she looked at the front of the house to confirm the address herself. With a single nod of her head, Rosemary held up one finger, turning to open the front door to the house. Kennedy! Can you come out here for a second, please? She yelled into the house using the girl's full name to not cause any extra confusion to the situation. One moment, she went upstairs to change. I'm sorry, Jessica said, feeling more than a little confused. Are we talking about the same person? Kennedy Towns, who is being fostered at the Adams residence. With Mia Adams, who wishes to adopt the 17-year-old boy? Feeling like her blood was starting to boil, old memories from many years ago flitting through her mind, Rosemary once more held up a finger. Just you wait, she said, waiting to hear footsteps on the stairs before opening the door. Seeing Dee Dee, she motioned the girl forward, putting one hand protectively on her shoulder and feeling the strap of a training bra underneath the shirt this time. Honey, please tell this woman your name? Seeing the frumpy Asian woman looking at him with a pinched expression on her face made Kennedy feel unrecoverable. He wasn't sure who the woman was, but wasn't enjoying anyone seeing him dressed the way he was. The way she seemed to scrutinize him made him feel like someone who was looking for a mistake, something he had done, and then he thought of the night before and how Kenzie and Abby had attacked that boy because of him and how everyone left before any police showed up, and figured this was just things catching up to him. I'm Kennedy Towns, I'm sorry, it was my fault. He began to say how it was his fault for not moving when the other boy wanted to play. Kennedy knew better than to stand his ground. That only resulted in things getting worse, and while he was used to being in trouble, he didn't want the two girls, brats or not, to get into trouble because of him. Honey, nothing that is happening is your fault. Tell the nice lady here your nickname and how old you are. Rosemary said, hoping her hand and tone of voice was reassuring enough for the girl and that none of her own anger was slipping into what she was saying. The idea that if her sister hadn't given this girl a home that the bullshit Child Protective Service would have protected this girl out onto the streets at age 11, similarly how they had done to her, though not as extreme, all because of bad paperwork. They call me Dee Dee and I'm 10. It hurt him to say that he was 7 years his own junior, like admitting that to this police officer would make it true. Some people, not all, were nicer to him when he was younger, like it is more okay to hit a kid because he was 12 instead of 9 and hope the woman wouldn't press charges or however that worked after the kid got beat up the night before. Thank you, honey. Rosemary bent down slightly, giving the girl a kiss on the forehead. You can go back inside, do me a favor and watch some cartoons with your sister. Maybe turn it up loud for now, okay? He wasn't sure exactly what was happening, but to go watch TV and turn the volume up only meant one thing in his book: there was going to be an argument and then probably a fight. Please don't fight because of me. No one is going to fight, hon. You run along now, okay? Rosemary gave the girl a gentle push to head back inside before shutting the door and turning back to the dark-haired woman in front of her, who still had a perplexed look on her face. Jessica, who had watched the blonde girl who stood at around 5 foot, just like the ward of the state that had been placed here and then introduced herself as Kennedy Towns, was speechless. She ran her finger across her tablet screen, only seeing words like boy and he when talking about Kennedy. This can't be right. She looked from her tablet screen and up to the redhead in front of her like she had the answers. Now you have met Kennedy. As you could see, she looked healthy, happy and unmarred, unlike other homes you have put her in, and before you try to rebut and say it wasn't you or you couldn't have known. I should not need to remind you of that not-so-little scar on her face. Some say scars build character, but what she has is a permanent reminder of trauma she had to endure because of the state's ineptitude. Not even counting the trauma that caused it, do you have any idea what a scar on a girl's face does to their self-esteem? It wasn't. The social worker stammered as the woman's temper started to flare and her voice raised. She had read the child's file, or at least part of it, and skimmed the rest. She hadn't really had the time to do a deep dive. She had been on the job for only a few months, and from day one she had felt overwhelmed with the workload, and it just never ended. Cutbacks, employee retention issues, her supervisors said. She had gotten into the field to help people, help those that had no one in their corner, and despite just starting her career, she could understand why this job crushed people. It wasn't just the workload, the work itself put an emotional weight on her shoulders. When she could help someone in need, her heart soared, but it was that and worse for those she couldn't assist. No, none of that. You have a 10-year-old girl here that your agency, that you are the face of currently, trying to say she is a 17-year-old boy. What would happen if my sister hadn't taken her in? I will tell you what. The system, you, would label her as an adult, 18 in a year, and would send her packing. What exactly is a child to do on the streets by themselves? You want to know the truth? I will tell you a little story about a young woman, a girl really that hadn't made it to 18 and was in the foster system. She was pushed out the door with a poor education because no one cares to teach those they deem unworthy. A worksheet here, one there, and hey look, you can have a degree, maybe, if you pass the school equivalency test. If not, oh well, no one cares. No real education, no money, and on the streets. What does she do to survive? I'm betting you have a few ideas, and anything your imagination is showing you, just know it was worse. Rosemary's voice picked up more and more as she went on. Her story becoming more personal, words like she and her being replaced with I and tears filling her own eyes as she relived memories that she wished were forgotten. Laying into the social worker verbally had started as anger at what they were doing to Kennedy, and while that thought never left her mind or her intentions, what this woman was, what she represented became something more as the pain from her own past overtook her. Rosemary didn't hate Jessica, she didn't know the woman, but she hated what had happened to herself and what she saw happening to the sweet but shy girl that her sister had taken in. Do you think any of that is fair? Do you? Is that what you want for Dee Dee, for Kennedy? At one point Jessica had held up her tablet as a shield even as she closed her eyes and cringed at the verbal assault. The story the fiery-tempered woman had told was horrible, if true, and she was sure by the flared emotions at least most of it was, then she was one of the people that the system failed. She had seen Kennedy and the girl didn't look anything like a teen boy and wasn't sure how such a dramatic mistake was possible. Mixed records before things were digitized, lack of time, burnt-out employees and passed from one caseworker to another, she was sure all of that had an impact on how something like this could happen. No, no, Anne. Jessica swallowed hard, willing herself to look into the woman's green angry eyes. I am truly, from the bottom of my heart sorry for what you had to go through, and I will do my best to make sure Kennedy. She paused for a second before continuing, using the familiar nickname the girl was using. Dee Dee, I will make sure everything is set right. Oh, you will. I swear if I hear one word about this colossal fuck-up again I will be hiring a lawyer. How your agency tried to actively destroy a person's life. That girl. Rosemary pointed back to the front door, just now realizing how far she was from the house as they now stood in the front yard. She had been marching forward through her tirade and Jessica had been backing up, step by step. That girl is about to go have a fun day out with her new sisters. A friend of mine. Again Rosemary paused, this time just for a heartbeat as she mentally added to what she was saying. An ex-coworker picturing one of the times they had worked together for a bachelor party. Works for a traveling ballet troupe and is in town for the month. I'm taking girls to see their dress rehearsals. She is going to have fun, and I don't need any of that ruined today or ever with thoughts of why people keep thinking she is a boy. Nodding fast enough that her dark hair started to bounce, Jessica quickly agreed. She would have fixed the mistake even if the angry woman hadn't ripped into her, but it surely drove the point home. Yes, of course, yes, I can only imagine. I better go and get to work on all that. I do hope you and your family have a great day. Yes, I'm gonna, you have a wonderful day. She said, taking a few steps back with each utterance of the word yes before turning around, exiting the white fenced house and got in her car as quickly as she could. Once inside she let the cold air from the car blow over her as she tried to calm heart-beating heart. She did need to fix this problem, but could see submitting record change requests sitting on someone's desk for ages and there being a chance that the person who reviewed the records would see the old files and reject the changes without absolute proof the ward of the state was actually a different gender and age. Subjecting the girl to a physical, having to show her private parts just because the government said they didn't believe they were the gender they said they were, sounded barbaric. It was against the rules, but in the long run she would be protecting the girl and the state by just making a few changes on her own without submitting a records change request. A few small changes to set things right would keep any extra trouble away from the blue-eyed girl she met and keep the state from a costly lawsuit that they would in the end settle. Doing this on her own was for the best, and then, she put her hand over her chest, still feeling her heart beating rapidly. Then she would be taking some much-needed vacation time. Standing in the yard, Rosemary watched the Asian woman get back into her car and turned around to walk back inside the house, before stopping to take a few calming breaths. She hadn't intended for all of that to happen. She did want to lay into the woman and didn't want Dee Dee to overhear talks of her being a teen boy, but all of what she did, that hadn't been her intention. Still though, Jessica the social worker had agreed to fix the problem, so in the end she got what she wanted. Calming herself and feeling accomplished, Rosemary opened the front door, only to find her eldest niece standing next to it and purposely avoiding eye contact. The television from the living room was not exactly blaring, but it was certainly loud, and it sounded like Abigail and Kennedy were now watching a Disney movie instead of a show. Was someone eavesdropping? She asked accusingly. "Ah," Mackenzie answered, her hands clasped behind her back as she fidgeted. She had wanted to see who it was when Kennedy went out, and when he had come back and he had shrugged when asked who it was and said something about a cop. Doing her best to ignore how loud Kennedy and Abby were, she tried to focus on the conversation outside. Kennedy had said something about wanting to watch something else that was better, and Abby said she knew exactly what to put on. The opening song about a quiet village followed by a bunch of people saying bonjour made it obvious what her little sister had put on. The conversation outside had been much more interesting and eye-opening. Mackenzie had heard things she never knew before about her aunt. She wasn't sure what troubled her more. What her Aunt Rosie had been through, or the fact she had just convinced the woman to change Kennedy's records to reflect what she believed to be true. "How much did you hear?" Rosemary asked with concern in her voice. Not everything," the young teen replied sheepishly, not wanting to admit to what she had learned about. Rosemary made the sound with two small nods of her head as she bit her bottom lip. Putting a hand on the girl's shoulder, she looked directly into her blue-green eyes, the same eyes as her older sister. "The world isn't always kind, and we do the best we can to live in it, and we always make sure to help those we care about. If you ever want to, or feel like you need to, you can come talk to me or your mother about this, or anything. Okay?" "Yeah. I will," Mackenzie said, having no intention of doing that and immediately feeling guilty for the falsehood. "Good, how about you go over and put the TV on a reasonable volume? I just need to do something real quick and the four of us can watch the movie together. After that I have a fun surprise for you all, well, maybe less of a surprise for you after you're skulking about," she teased, giving a small tickle to her niece's side. "Scene 19, keep your eyes open and try to stay still, honey," Rosemary said as she ran her mascara wand across Dee Dee's eyelashes. Her eldest niece had asked if she was allowed to wear a little makeup. She figured a little makeup on the 13-year-old wouldn't hurt much and used her cosmetics to give her a subtle daytime look, nothing her sister would be upset about, or so she thought. No sooner had she finished when Abby had practically jumped in her lap, demanding to be made pretty too. She had given the little one a wave of her mascara to her lashes, and then some lip balm, a spritz of her perfume, and declared her finished. Dee Dee hadn't asked, but there was no way she was going to have her feeling left out. For the 10-year-old she added eyeliner, mascara, and was going to run some pink lipstick across her lips. Doing the girl's makeup made her feel happy. To her, makeup used to be just war paint. Something she put on to hide who she was, and to attract men. Over time she used it more subtly, unless she was dressing up, just enough to enhance, making her feel pretty. Once she started doing it just for herself, her own confidence improved, and in return she actually made more money. Now she couldn't imagine leaving the house without at least some eyeliner. For Dee Dee, she hadn't extended her lashes much, but the eyeliner with the slight wings really made the girl's blue eyes more captivating. She was just so precious, it made Rosemary want to protect her that much more. She hoped little things like this could help the girl come more into her own. Sitting cross-legged in an Indian style, Kennedy tried not to squirm under the direct attention of the woman who wanted him to call her Aunt Rosie. She had made an appearance in his dreams the night before, and in it they had been closer than they were right now, but as the green-eyed beauty leaned closer as she brought a tube of lipstick to his lips, all he could really focus on was her own soft kissable lips. Those same lips he had kissed in his dream, where he had pushed the sexy woman to her back, her not fighting him in the least as they made out. His fantasy was a far cry from what was happening in real life. Instead of his partner in bed, she was just Aunt Rosie, giving a makeover to who she thought was her niece, and he couldn't find it in himself to say no. Or at least not say no enough to matter. How he ended up sitting here in the girl's shirt with a purple butterfly on the back, making it look like he had wings, girl's shorts, a training bra and the Alice band back on his head was so surreal. Kennedy had watched the pretty woman put makeup on both the girls. Just watching her work had been captivating, but that had been something he enjoyed watching. In the past he had watched a few of his foster mothers or foster sisters put on makeup and it had always amazed him how they knew how to do it, how they were able to change their looks in such a short time. While he enjoyed watching them work, he also hoped it was something normal for a boy, but not something he ever dared ask. That was when he was told it was his turn. "Your turn to look pretty, Dee Dee." Rosemary waved the girl over, patting the couch seat next to her. "No, I'm okay, I don't need any makeup," he had said, trying to be polite. As much as he enjoyed watching girls put makeup on, the last thing he wanted was to wear any himself. "No," Rosemary said as she gave a small shake of her head, a bright smile on her lips. "You don't need makeup, you are already pretty, Dee Dee." I. Kennedy felt a blush come to his cheeks. Being called pretty wasn't a real compliment, not to a boy, but he also wasn't much used to getting compliments, or much in the way of positive reinforcement. The woman he had a crush on was calling him pretty and he couldn't help but to feel flustered. "Come on, pretty girl, sit over here and I will show you how much prettier you can be." In mostly a daze, his cheeks still red, he had sat on the couch, letting her put different makeup products on his face and enjoying every light touch of her fingers, wishing each lingered a little longer. When she had proclaimed him done, he was afraid to see himself in the mirror, but before he could even do that, she had his foster sisters come in and squeeze close so she could take a selfie with them all. Kennedy of course smiled brightly as he was forced to squeeze in close, his shoulder touching her soft ample breast as they got in close for the photo. Worse than the makeup was the announcement that came after, one that filled him with dread. Aunt Rosie had stood in front of them all, clapping her hands once excitedly, a move that he was well aware of how it made her chest move. "I have a little surprise for the three of you. Today we are going to go see a friend of mine, a beautiful person. I know you all will just love her. She has a heart of gold, a smile that men would go to war for, and best of all, she is a ballerina." Her friend really was a sweet person, and Rosemary was happy she had found a real life outside of being an escort. Getting a chance to go see them perform, it was a dress rehearsal, but she really hoped the girls liked it. She was positive Abby would, but she wasn't sure about the other two. "A real ballerina," Abby said, drawing out the word. Kennedy missed what was said next, imagining another sexy woman coming around. He couldn't do anything looking the way he did, but he could dream. "Yep, so each of you go get your shoes on so we can go see her and her troupe perform." When Rosemary gave the girls their marching orders, she gave them all a smile before heading into the kitchen to quickly load the dishwasher for her sister. She was here to both see her nieces and to help. Last thing she needed to was leave an extra mess about. Mackenzie watched her aunt leave the living room and her little sister darted off to get socks and shoes, and thought she was going to have to grab Kennedy so they could have a talk, but he had only stood there looking lost. "Hey, we need to talk," she insisted, being unable to get him alone till now. "I heard what Aunt Rosie was saying outside." Blinking, Kennedy felt the increased weight on his eyelashes. He knew they were there, but never noticed them, that is till now. With the makeup that had been put on them, it wasn't like looking through a curtain, but they were definitely noticeable now. "Yeah? Did she take care of things?" Putting her hands on her slender hips, Mackenzie drew her lips into a line as she nodded. Yeah, she did." Touching his chest, Kennedy could feel the training bra under his girly shirt as he let out a sigh. Between the movie where he got to cuddle up close to the red-headed woman and the makeup, he had almost forgotten about the trouble that had followed him back to his new home from the night before. "That's a relief. I thought the cop showing up was going to be trouble." "No, Kennedy." Mackenzie leaned a little closer as she spoke. That wasn't a police officer and there's trouble, like big trouble. Okay, detective, not cop, but what kind of trouble? I thought you said it was taken care of. The relief he had just felt started to fade and be replaced by something darker. Letting out a huff of air, Mackenzie didn't say anything for 2 heartbeats. I swear you were spending too much time around Abby with how difficult you can be. That wasn't any type of police, that was your caseworker from the child service place, and, waving his hand in the air, Kennedy dismissed what she was saying. Look, Kenzie, I know who my caseworker is and that wasn't them, and if I somehow forgot what they looked like, they wouldn't have forgotten what I look like. I don't know if you were messing with me or you just didn't hear right. Opening her mouth to reply, Mackenzie stopped, no words coming out. She knew what she had heard, but the TV had also been really loud behind her. I know what I heard, and now the child people think you really are a 10-year-old girl. You need to go tell Aunt Rosie the truth, before things get worse for you. He didn't feel like arguing with the girl, he knew that wasn't the person assigned to him. I'm not going to do that. Now if you excuse me, I have to get my shoes on or figure out a way to not go to some stupid ballet play, recital thing. Dismissing the younger girl, Kennedy went upstairs, back into his own room and put on what he had to in order to leave. Socks, lucky he had some that weren't as girly as the pair he had the other day with their frills. Ignoring what he was already wearing, the idea of putting on those socks sent a shiver through his body. Grabbing his only current shoes, the black Mary Jane shoes with their slight rubber heel, he tried to think of a reason why he could just stay behind. Going to the ballet sounded boring and he didn't want to leave the house looking like a girl. He needed to talk to Miss Mia so he could get some boys' clothes, but she would be gone till later. I could say I was sick, he asked himself, remembering a time he wasn't feeling well and his foster father at the time put one hand to his forehead and declared that since he had no fever he was fine or just faking it. Imagining the beautiful green-eyed woman looking at him with concern as she felt his head was nice thought, but the look that would come over her face when she thought she was lying, like he had seen before in others, he couldn't do it. Kennedy's stomach felt full of nothing but dread, lacking breakfast after sleeping in and the unexpected visit from the cop he had completely forgotten to eat. He would have to tough things out a little longer and then when Miss Mia got home he could tell her everything and she could maybe tell her sister what had happened was all a misunderstanding, how it wasn't his fault so that Aunt Rosie wouldn't be mad at him. She was so nice to him, saying the best things and the idea of her looking at him with disgust tore him up, so he had to stay the course. Still sitting there, Kennedy picked up one of the shoes to put it on when he saw Mackenzie standing in the doorway to his bedroom, looking none too happy with him. Irritated after she tried to mess with him or just didn't understand what she heard and wouldn't fess up to it, he snapped at her as he acknowledged her. What do you want now? I just came up here to tell you Aunt Rosie wanted all of us to change into something nice and shorts and a t-shirt aren't nice enough, so you will have to change. Mackenzie had her arms folded just below her chest as she stepped into the room. She was completely lying, but if Kennedy wanted to play the part of a girl then she was going to make sure he had an outfit to match. What? You're not dressed up. He replied, pointing out the pushy girl was wearing jeans and a purple and white tank top. I haven't changed yet, you goof. I can change quickly. You don't exactly know how to put on tights by yourself, do you? Don't answer that. I know you don't know how and it is going to be chilly where we are going, so I'm going to help. But... Kennedy started to argue in a whiny voice. You could always tell the truth. Mackenzie offered. No. He replied sullenly. He wished she just knew the truth. He wanted the woman to see him as much more than some girl who she thinks pretty. Kennedy wanted her to run her fingers across his cheek, touching his scar and telling him he was handsome. As much as he wanted that, it wasn't going to happen. Not at least till things got settled, and he needed Miss Mia for that. What do I have to wear? Scene 20. Sitting in the dark theater, Kennedy looked around at the place, at all the red curtains draped everywhere, all the empty seats, the balconies that were vacant up above. He sat with an open chair to one side and on the other Aunt Rosie. When they sat down and she held his hand with a smile, he couldn't help but beam back. While he still held her hand, something she was also doing with Abby on the other side of her, he was mostly just looking around the place. The only other people in the room other than his group were three older, gray-haired people in the front row. Much as he didn't want to sit and watch a show like this, he couldn't wait for it to start and distract him from what he had to change into. He still wore the makeup that was put on him and the striped yellow headband, the frustratingly soft girly panties, the training bra, but what was new was opaque white tights, a yellow checkered skirt that while wasn't short, it didn't even come down to his knees, and lastly a simple white blouse that just had wavy ruffled short fabric for sleeves. He hated the outfit he was wearing the tights or pantyhose or whatever they were called felt very different in the Mary Jane shoes than the socks. What he wore wasn't even the biggest problem, Kenzie and Abby had outchanged it all. When he had come downstairs, Kenzie smirked at him and told her aunt how he wanted to change into something prettier after the makeover. He wanted to be furious at her, but for some reason the idea that he wanted to look prettier made the woman give him a 1,000-watt smile. The young teen had tricked him, but he couldn't deny enjoying the attention he got from her aunt because of it. Kennedy was sure he would get her back for it, he just wasn't sure how. Maybe tell her she an ugly pimple and act like it is odd she can't find it when it is just so obvious. The thought tickled his mind enough to distract him long enough for the music to start, some of the lights dimmed and a pair of spotlights turned on to light up the stage. Tonight we present to you Christopher Stoll's retelling of Beauty and the Beast through dance, one of the world's favorite fairy tales. A deep voice boomed from some unseen speakers. "Oh! We just watched this," Kennedy heard Abigail say from the other side of Rosemary, followed by a shushing noise from Kenzie. Shortly after the thick curtains on the stage pulled apart, the music felt light and flowy to Kennedy. He watched as a girl in white tights like his own and a green fabric overalls danced onto the stage. After a few steps he saw another girl come from the opposite side wearing identical clothing, but with an orange color. They moved and came together, touching hands briefly at the center of the stage, the only things around them a table and a pair of chairs. Behind them a backdrop of small thatch-roofed houses and a fountain at their center. Kennedy expected them to start singing, but no words were said. Instead a pair of girls, they were all women really, came from the left of the stage, and like the first person to come out, soon as they took a few steps on stage someone else came from the other side, each of the new dancers wearing yellow. If the announcer hadn't said what the production was, Kennedy would have no idea what was going on as everyone on stage danced about, moving as if they were cleaning, carrying things or just having wordless conversations. That was till yet another person came on stage. She had dark brown hair up in a stylized bun and a blue garment. While the others danced closer to the backdrop, this person moved at the front of the stage and the music had changed into one familiar to Kennedy. It was the opening song where Belle moved about the town singing her song. The dress-wearing boy would have crossed his arms now knowing what he had to sit through, but he didn't dare pull his hand away. The production went on for close to an hour, never anyone talking, just music and dance. Kennedy felt bored to tears, wishing he had his portable CD player so he could listen to something he actually liked, or at least that is how he first felt by the time a half hour had passed. His mind wandered and he really paid attention to where he was once again. He had never been to a play or ballet thingy, he had been to the movies before, had even snuck into a few. Plays and stuff were things wealthy people did, or so he thought, and the fact that he was here, a performance being done to an audience of less than 10. Aunt Rosie said this was a dress rehearsal, but it seemed like a real performance to him. No one was messing up or asking to try something a second time to get it right. The fact that he was brought to such a private show made it feel exclusive, like he was in on something. Those thoughts made him sneak a few glances to the woman next to him, and when he was caught looking she had leaned over to him with a big smile on her face, one he returned on instinct. "Don't you just love this?" he had heard his crush whisper to him. It seemed so simple, but it changed how he viewed the show. He wasn't being forced to sit through something he hated. Aunt Rosie was sharing something she loved with him, also the girls, but he discounted them. I do. The show didn't feel over, but everyone had departed the stage, or those he could see when the curtain covered everything again and the lights came on. Is it over? Kennedy asked, confused. No, just when they would have their intermission, it means it is just half over. Everyone gets up, uses the bathroom, buys something from the concession stand, and then comes back to watch the other half. Us though, Rosemary said as she stood. We are doing something else. We are going to go backstage to meet my friend and the rest of the dancers. Going back the way they came in, Kennedy and the two girls followed their aunt as she moved to a side door, knocking twice. As if it was some code, the metal door opened slightly, just enough for Kennedy to see the brown-haired woman who was playing the part, or dancing the part as Belle. Candy! I'm so glad you could make it, the woman said as the door swung open. And who have you got here? I'm told at least one of you is a princess. Candy? Mackenzie said with a baffled tone. At the same time as her older sister spoke, Abigail stepped forward, pointing to herself with her thumb. I'm the princess. Abby Bug, Rosemary said with a warning tone. The young girl let out a sigh, speaking in a half-hearted tone. Kenzie and Dee Dee can be princesses too. Giving her youngest niece a smirk and a wink, Rosemary turned her attention to her friend. Girls, this is my friend Kelly. She sometimes calls me Candy because it is a nickname, but only one she is allowed to use, so only call me Aunt Rosie. Rosemary made a point of looking her old coworker in the eye, so she knew that she had messed up before she continued the introductions. Kelly, these are my nieces, Kenzie, Dee Dee, and Abby. It is an absolute pleasure to meet you all, Kelly said, bending down at the same time putting her hands on her white nylon-covered knees. I bet you all are excited to see how the magic happens, but I have a surprise for you that I don't think your auntie told you about. Each of you are going to be ballet dancers today. Isn't that exciting? It in fact did not fill Kennedy with excitement. Nothing even close to that emotion went through him. He could feel his heart starting to beat faster, even hear it beating in his ears, the world growing quieter around him. His breathing started to come more rapidly. Look at her, she looks just beside herself with excitement, Kelly said, looking at the middle child dressed in yellow. She even wore the right tights. Did someone let it slip what we were doing? She asked her friend to raise an eyebrow to her friend. Kennedy knew what they were talking about was directed at him, but what they were specifically saying fell on deaf ears. His mind started to reel as he looked past the woman named Kelly. Behind her was backstage, and it was bustling with activity with hardly a man in sight. It made him understand why a man might choose to do this, but no one was going to see him as a male. Hey! Let's go! Abigail said, grabbing a hold of her new sister's wrist as she lagged behind when others moved to go backstage. No, wait! Kennedy complained, trying to keep himself from being pulled along, but his unfocused mind was no match for a determined 8-year-old who was happy to use both arms to pull her sister along. What followed was one of his worst afternoons he had ever experienced. He was given a white unitard that had a silver sequin design around the collar, a pink poofy tutu to put on. Holding the articles in his hands, he looked at them almost paralyzed. He wasn't even sure who had handed them to him, but he did know he wasn't going to do this. Or at least he thought as much. As soon as he looked away from the garments to protest, already seeing Abby run off without own outfit in hand and held over her head like it was flag, he found Kenzie meeting his gaze. Don't worry, sis, I will help you get dressed, Mackenzie said, leaning in close to whisper. You won't tell the truth, so this is what you get, she added before taking the feminized by both the shoulders and pulling him along to a changing area. Looking over her shoulder as she pushed the obvious reluctant person along, she called out to her aunt and her friend. She is feeling a bit of stage fright. She thinks she will have to go on stage and dance. Dee said she wants to be a ballerina, but doesn't know how. Finding himself shoved into the changing room, Kennedy was reminded how much of a gorilla the red-headed girl really was. I'm not going to put this on. You are, because you are my sweet little sister. What 10-year-old girl wouldn't want to be a ballerina? I mean, I already told Aunt Rosie that is what you want to be, but if you want to start telling the truth, you can start with why exactly that isn't true. When she didn't get a response, she reached for the clasp and zipper to Kennedy's skirt. Now get undressed, girly. The unitard and tutu were just the first steps, as it were, for his change in clothes. His Mary Jane shoes, just the picture of girliness, had been replaced with ballerina slippers, pinks and trailing with ribbons that were soon crisscrossed up over his ankles and tied in place. It wasn't just him, both Abby and Mackenzie were dressed similarly. It made Kennedy want to die from embarrassment. He was sure it wouldn't happen though, because if one could overdose on being embarrassed, he would have already died twice over. Aw. Just look at all of you, Rosemary said, practically bouncing the balls of her feet after seeing how precious each of them looked. She wasn't sure Mackenzie would go for this, but it made her so happy that she was not just accepting, but was helping Dee. That girl was another surprise. She had learned the day before that Dee wanted to be a race car driver, and today she had learned she also wanted to be a ballerina. It made her wonder how much it would cost to get the girls enrolled in some classes. Kelly, I can't thank you enough for this. It is nothing, less than nothing after everything you did for me, but we aren't done yet. The professional dancer turned her attention to the girls. Now that you are all in uniform, we are going to have a private lesson. It got worse, Kennedy thought, unable to believe he was now about to get a lesson on being a ballerina, and he was going to do it willingly. He wanted to blame the red-headed gorilla for this, but Kennedy knew it wasn't her fault. It was his. He was the agent of his own destruction. Sure, she and the little brat helped. I'm not feeling so good. I think will just sit this out, he said, using the excuse he thought of to not come here to begin with now that he was faced with such a taste. Aw, I'm sorry to hear that, Kelly said, frowning at the girl who was holding her stomach. She wondered if the girl was old enough to be having her monthly visit or if it was just an upset stomach. Come on, Dee, you can power through this. It is probably just nerves after you worked yourself up so much jumping up and down at your chance to be a real ballerina, Mackenzie said without even glancing in the boy's direction as she fiddled with the tutu around her own waist. Giving the taller girl a glare, one that faded quickly when he realized he was being watched, Kennedy gave in. Knowing the gorilla wouldn't stop, and that if he fought her much more she would press her little sister into encouraging him. With great shame he took his first lesson in ballet, and unfortunately Aunt Rosie seemed all too happy to get photos of them. Oh, so memorable moments as each of them were taught the different positions, or posed one way and then another. Tossing her head back with a massive smile on her face, Abby moved her hands up into the air before flapping them down slowly as she tried to imitate what she saw the real ballerinas do. Her eyes were half closed, but she opened one up fully to look at her older sister, who bumped into her hand as she danced about, it not coming to mind at all that she was the one moving into others' personal spaces. Moving her hands over her head, she did a small spin, imagining she looked much like the graceful dancers on stage. Coming to the end of her twirl, she stopped to give her new sister a thumbs up as Kelly had her move from through positions 1 to 5 and then do it over again. She had done them once, and with that mastered had moved on from instruction to just doing what she saw the other dancers were doing, but she was happy for Dee. Abby wasn't exactly sure what she wanted to be when she grew up, except be a Jedi and run around fighting bad guys, but this was what Dee wanted. Dancing was fun. She could understand why Dee liked it. She didn't think Kenzie liked it at all with the faces she was making, and that felt completely unfair because she had to really try hard to be talented, and it was paying off because Kelly wasn't trying to tell her what to do at all. Kenzie though, she was so graceful, it felt unfair. Kenzie, you look really pretty, you are like a real ballerina, she said, trying to make her sister feel better. I don't and I'm not, but thanks, Mackenzie said, only giving her little sister a partial glance as she moved to the next position. Very few people were looking at her, but she felt like an incredible fake and very awkward. Something she thought Abby should feel with the way she flailed about, but the girl didn't seem to be self-aware enough for such thoughts. She had pushed Kennedy into this and hadn't really given any thought into doing it herself. She felt like a fool. No, 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 Kelly said, holding up a hand so her friend's niece Dee Dee knew she could stop as she directed her words in the older of the three's directions. Mackenzie, yes? Kelly nodded her head to her own question. No one is good when the first start, not their first week, their first month, and definitely not their first lesson, but I can tell you what I do see. I see a young woman that has a natural talent that she could let grow. Kelly shrugged her shoulders once in an exaggerated fashion. Most people who do this for a career have been doing it almost their entire lives, me. Not so much, I hadn't taken a single class of ballet till I was 19 and look where I am. Kelly left out the part where she had danced and stripped for money for years. That wouldn't help encourage the girl. You. She nodded her head a few times. I think you were better than me when I first started. I bet you could be a prima ballerina one day and your little sister here. Kelly thumbed her finger behind her to the younger blue-eyed girl. She could be your understudy. Feeling a light blush come to her cheeks, Mackenzie looked from the pretty woman complimenting her to her aunt and then over the woman's shoulder to Kennedy. Imagining him dancing on stage and being second to her brought a smile to her face, a change from the grimace she had been wearing. Thank you. Her mother had always been full of compliments and encouragement, but that was her mom, it was part of her job. Hearing someone outside the family tell her she was talented. The day wasn't over, but already she thought this might be one of her best days ever. Scene 21. Getting ready to leave the back of the theater area. Kennedy had never been so happy to get changed into a skirt. The little ballerina uniform had been taken off and he was back in the yellow checkered skirt, frilly white blouse and black Mary Jane shoes. If wearing the outfit wasn't bad enough, being told he was good at being a ballerina when participating in the dance lessons was worse. He saw Abby having an absolute blast. While he thought at least Kenzie was suffering like he was, in the end she seemed rather pleased. He luckily got to take the unitard, tutu and dance slippers home like his foster sisters. When he had started to say he didn't need it, his resistance faded away when he felt someone hugging him from behind, her wonderful breasts pressing into his back. Being touched by the sexy redhead was enough for Kennedy to just about melt, let alone what went through his 17-year-old hormonal mind when she embraced him. You looked cute in it, we can hang it up in your closet and maybe if you're good we can see about giving you a reason to wear it again. Rosemary said, wanting to encourage the girl who seemed resistant to taking the little outfit home like she wasn't good enough. Okay. Before he came to live at the Adams household he hadn't had much real affection from others. There had been some, but not like he was getting now. Even the brats invaded his personal space for hugs, not something he was used to. Kennedy didn't know just how started he was for it and the positivity in his life, and when that was combined with the hormones running through his body he often found his mind go blank when either Miss Mia or Aunt Rosie hugged him, ran their fingers through his hair, or most contact really .0. That first day coming to the house he had already been preparing to go, for this just to be one more place he wanted to forget, but now he craved the attention the family gave him. At least most of it. The day before he had been fitted for a training bra, and today he was wearing one of them. That wasn't something he enjoyed at all, but before bed in a very unbrat-like action Abby and Kenzie had climbed into his bed, cuddling with him as he read his new book. Kennedy didn't think they were interested in cars and that just meant they were there for him, and as he thought about it as he was held he felt tears come to his stupid eyes. Hearing the sniffle, Rosemary loosened her grip and turned the little blonde girl around, seeing her pretty blue eyes were fighting tears. You know you deserve to have fun little things like this. You deserve to be happy, Dee. But... Kennedy started to say but was cut off when he was embraced once again, this time getting a face full of the green-eyed woman's ample bosom. No buts. You deserve to be happy, healthy, and loved, Rosemary said, pulling the girl into a protective embrace, wanting very much to protect her from the horrors of the world and somehow undo the toll it had already taken on her. Off to the side, holding both her own and her little sister's bag that held their new unitards, Mackenzie chewed on her lip, seeing the emotional moment. Seeing Kennedy just about to start crying as the skirt-wearing boy was held made her feel guilty all over again, even as she tried to tell herself it was his fault this was still happening. He didn't believe her before when she told him about who was actually at the door and thought this could be a good opportunity to show him that she really was just trying to help. Aunt Rosie. She waited for her aunt to look in her direction before continuing. That person that came to the door this morning, was she from the agency that sent us Kennedy? Taking in a breath, Rosemary gave one last squeeze to the little tyke before pulling away. Her hand reached out to touch her cheek gently. Leaving her hand there, she turned her head slightly to look at her niece, her mind going over the interaction. Yes, that was Dee's caseworker, and we cleared up a few things. She then turned her focus back to the blonde girl. The really good news is that we should be. Mia will be your new mom soon. The adoption paperwork should be going through very soon. How does that make you feel, Dee? Do you like the idea of my big sis becoming your mom? You also get 2 sisters in the deal. I think it is a pretty good deal. Really? It wasn't the first or second time he had been told about being fully adopted instead of just being fostered. Miss Mia kept saying how he was already part of the family, everything else was just paperwork, but hearing it would really be official made him happier than he could have thought. Yes, really. Rosemary moved her hand from the girl's cheek, tapping her nose with her index finger. What's really? Abby said as she came to a stop as she slid on the wooden floor, her shoes still in hand and wearing a white tutu over her normal clothes. Not really sure where the girl had come from, Kennedy shouldn't have been surprised by her barging into the conversation, just popping up. It seemed to be a thing she did. Though in this instance she was wearing a piece of clothing, the white tutu, that she didn't have before. Where did you get that? Right away he knew it was a stupid question. The real questions were the why and how. Taking in a deep breath, the young girl gave a great big smile as she pointed off in the distance to a pair of women that were stretching. They gave us pink tutus, but they are wearing white ones, so I asked for one and then they said they will check, and then I asked them if they really had to and maybe they could just give me one because I'm small and no one would notice. They laughed, but I was serious, and one of them talked to someone else, and now I have 2 tutus, 2 tutus, 2 tutus. She said, repeating the phrase, enjoying the way it sounded. Thinking the girl was something else, Kennedy shook his head. Her little smile could be infectious, but he was sure the 20-something woman had given her the piece of clothing just so she would go away, but in this instance at least she didn't bring one for him. Abby had been so distracting he didn't really think about everything that had just been said, but when Mackenzie asked a probing question he felt his heart skip a beat. Ignoring Abby, Mackenzie pressed on. The news Kennedy was being adopted was good, but not with all the lies that she just knew would get them all in trouble. That's good, I mean. Kennedy is already part of the family, but what did you have to clear up? The insanity that was little Kennedy's file wasn't something Rosemary wanted to think about. It was a perfect example of how the system failed people and they suffered for it. It was that mess that you already know about. With Kennedy being older and a boy. She waved her hand in Kennedy's direction, her wrist and fingers fluttering as she dismissed it as nonsense. No one is going to make that mistake anymore, I promise. That mistake. Kennedy repeated in a small voice, his eyes drilling down to pinpoints. She couldn't have been my caseworker. I know her. Unless. It wasn't the first time he had been handed off to someone else. No, 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 no. Can. Mackenzie started as she scrunched up one of her eyes, trying to think if that could really just happen. Someone could just open a file, change a few things, and just like that the government thought a boy was a girl and could just suddenly be 7 years younger. They really just change things like that? You talk to one person and that gets fixed? Standing back up to her full height, Rosemary popped her back. She was a limber person, stretched, did yoga, but she never thought she could do what the dancers here did. Looking at the woman preparing to go back on stage to rehearse the second act, she remembered many years ago when she had a ballerina toy that had a shiny tiara with a plastic gem that reflected light. Opportunities to do something like this were never hers, and she wasn't going to let the world take things like this from Kennedy, not anymore. Sometimes that is all it takes. I knew someone that was declared dead because of an administrative error. He left it alone because he figured just living his life would prove otherwise and they would fix it. They being the government, did not. In fact, when he tried to clear it up, he had to get a lawyer, and even with that it took months. So, sometimes things can go like that. Now come on, let's head back to our seats to see the rest of the performance. Aunt Rosie. Mackenzie glared at Kennedy. What would happen if someone changed those documents and it was all a lie? Considering the question, Rosemary wished whoever first messed up Dee Dee's records would get a reckoning, but she imagined nothing would really happen. Too many hands, too much time had been passed. It depends. If it was an accident, maybe nothing. If it was on purpose, that could mean going to jail or a big fine like $250,000, I think, for fraud. She gave a shrug to her niece. I'm not a lawyer, just have heard a few things. Sitting back in his seat, Kennedy found his mind way too distracted to watch the performance. He hardly even paid attention to the fact Kenzie had sat down next to him this time. He wasn't sure what to do if what he heard was true. He couldn't believe you could just walk up to his caseworker and say, hey, this teen boy is actually a 10-year-old girl, and then boom, that was what his profile would say. Heck, he had been in foster care long enough that him being 10 should be out of the question. He also knew that he had to get a yearly physical for school, so they would have to discount all of that. No. Even if that new lady was convinced, nothing would change. Leaning closer to her soon-to-be sibling, Mackenzie nudged him. Hey. You need to fess up, she said in a harsh whisper. It's fine, they can't just go and change the records like that. Kennedy shoved her hand away. They did though, and you heard what Aunt Rosie said. Mom could go to jail because you lied, the upset girl said, giving her foster brother a shove. Stop pushing me, you gorilla. I'm the one who would know, he said, pressing his thumb to his chest as he leaned closer to the girl so that she got the message. I'm the one who has been put in home after home, just trying to survive while you. He started to get worked up, wanting to tell her how good she had it, how she had an easy life, but the words didn't come. Kennedy was aware the girl had a father once, and while it wasn't talked about how losing him came about, the man was still talked about, something people only did when they missed someone they loved. That was something he could understand, and the feeling of jealousy for what the girl did have wasn't something new, but him having it too was. Just forget it, okay? Glaring at the blue-eyed boy, Mackenzie made a decision. She wasn't going to let her aunt or her mom get in trouble because of Kennedy. Fine, but I'm going to tell Mom you wanted this and that you have been lying. Rolling his eyes, Kennedy started to shift in his seat away from the girl. Do whatever you want. Getting comfortable, he tried paying attention to the dancing. He still didn't care for it, and his mind continued to be distracted.